Training Day. My name is Margie Green, and I'm the Executive Officer of the State Contractors Board. We are excited to host this year's event online as we connect you with a variety of representatives from state and local government, including Nevada's Labor Commissioner, Governor Sisolak's State Apprenticeship Program Director, the President of Nevada's Association of Building Officials, Nevada's Public Utilities Commission, and NV Energy. You'll also hear from a well-respected labor law attorney, as well as today's industry association leaders from all sectors of construction. Getting back to today's forum, we have three 60-minute panel discussions intended to help you navigate various issues concerning Nevada labor laws and apprenticeship programs, to understand some of the common violations being noticed by state and local agencies and how you can stay in compliance. Then also to share perspectives on the current and future state of the industry as we continue to adjust as a society to the impacts brought on by the pandemic. As you tune in from your office, home, or work site, hold on a second here. I lost my connection. I would encourage and welcome you to ask questions following the information our panelists have to share. And again, unless you're a panelist, if you could keep yourself on mute so that we can clearly listen to our presenters, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions following each presentation. Our goal in providing this training year after year is to give you information from experts who can help you navigate the responsibilities of being a licensed contractor, answer your questions directly, and share valuable insights regarding the state of the industry and related trends. We understand the personal and professional difficulties many of our contractors and their employees have endured during recent months, and we hope that you will find today's information valuable as we look forward to the future and continuing to build a strong Nevada. To all the panelists who have taken the time to be with us today, I want to thank you in advance for your time and your expertise in sharing those thoughts with everyone today. And moderating today's panel discussion will be the board's Public Information Officer, Jennifer Lewis. And at this time, unless there are any initial questions for me, I will turn it over to Jennifer to get our discussion regarding Nevada labor laws started.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Welcome everybody, and thank you to our panelists with us today. Just a couple housekeeping issues or initiatives that I wanted to share with you to begin. Although Ms. Green mentioned we're going to take question and answer at the end of the discussion, if you don't want to forget your question, you're welcome to use the chat function just to kind of record that, and we'll be happy to address that at the end of the discussion. As well, as Ms. Green mentioned, please make sure that your video and audio stay muted and off during the discussion. And then if you'd like to join in with either of those options following for the Q&A, you're more than welcome to. All right, so let's get started. Can our panelists please take a moment to introduce yourself and share the role you play in regard to enforcing or helping contractors comply with Nevada's labor laws?
I guess I can start.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Brian Bradford, and I'm an attorney with Fisher & Phillips. To all the parents that are out there, let me say I am with you and praying for you as we're going through the second day of school. The first day was certainly chaotic, and I'm hoping that my internet will hold up throughout the duration of this webinar. In terms of my role in helping contractors comply with Nevada labor and employment laws, I'd like to think of my role as twofold. First, I provide advice and counsel to organizations regarding how to comply with state and federal labor and employment laws. My primary focus has been on anti-discrimination law, but I also provide advice and counsel on wage and hour laws and other state statutory laws. Of course, despite our best efforts, disputes may arise and either initiated by employees or governmental agencies themselves. That's when I don my second hat. In that capacity, I assist employers in responding to government complaints, as well as administrative charges leading on through to litigation or arbitration or other forms of alternate dispute resolution.
So good morning. My name is Shannon Chambers. I'm the Nevada Labor Commissioner. So I'm the government side of enforcing wage and hour laws in the state of Nevada, and the Labor Commissioner in the state of Nevada has a broad area of statutes and regulations that we have to enforce, not just minimum wage and overtime, but we also license private employment agencies, and we're also responsible for enforcing prevailing wage laws on public works projects. So as a government agency and a regulator, we take the approach that we expect Nevada employers to follow the law and do the right thing. We know that does not always happen. Since I've been the Labor Commissioner, we have expanded our training and outreach, I would say probably 10,000% since 2014, again, to educate employers and to educate contractors about Nevada labor laws. Unfortunately, there is still an element out there of entities and individuals who continue to violate Nevada labor laws, and that's when we step in with regulatory enforcement through administrative penalties and collection of back wages, penalties, also referring, in the cases of contractors, referring cases to the Nevada State Contractors Board and to other entities for potential revocation of licenses and other potential business licenses that those entities or individuals might have. In the 6 years that I've been Labor Commissioner, each year our administrative penalty collection has gone up each year over 100%. So when I came on board, we collected 0 administrative penalties. We're going to collect up to $400,000 just this fiscal year alone. So that doesn't mean that we're out there just issuing administrative penalties for no reason. It means that there are still individuals out there who are not following Nevada labor laws, and in the cases where it's intentional, that's when the administrative penalties come in. But again, we try and work with contractors, employers to get them to do the right thing. And then on the other side of it, if we need to take enforcement action, we are certainly willing to do that. And we do not collect and keep any of those administrative penalties. They go right back to the state. So I've heard the comment that you're only issuing penalties because you're going to keep it for your office. That's just simply not true. We're trying to get Nevada employers and contractors in compliance with Nevada labor laws because that hurts the good contractors and the good businesses that are out there who are following the law. So that's kind of a big scale approach of what the Nevada Labor Commissioner does. And I know we'll get into some more specifics down the road, but I'll leave some time for Mr. Williams here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Richard Williams, the Nevada State Apprenticeship Director with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. Like on a personal note, I achieved my journeyman certificate many years ago, 4-year journeyman certificate with the Carpenters Union. So this position is very dear to me. So just kind of tell you about our office. So my office handles the registered apprenticeship programs in Nevada with regards to compliance and the regulatory duties of NRS and NAC 610. So we ensure that apprentices are properly registered, that they're verified on public works projects, and that the apprentice is receiving the proper training as outlined in the approved program standards. Working in conjunction with the State Apprenticeship Council and our Labor Commissioner, we work very closely together. And a good example of working close together is enforcing SB 207. There's been some hiccups with that, but working with the Labor Commissioner and our office, I think it's worked out really well. And I know there's some issues with SB 207, maybe some confusion out there, but the biggest thing to remember is, in order to be registered as or considered apprentice, you have to be registered with the state, and I can't stress that enough. And there's over 6,000 apprentices in the state, over 60 programs that we monitor for compliance, and that's just a quick overview of what my office does.
All right, great. Well, I'd like to start with Commissioner Chambers. Employers in Nevada have several responsibilities when complying with Nevada labor laws. Can you explain some of the most common issues your office investigates and also share advice that could help keep contractors in terms of better understanding what their requirements are and how best to avoid administrative penalties that you mentioned?
Great, and thank you, Ms. Lewis, and again, thank you to the Executive Director of the State Contractors Board. Again, this is Shannon Chambers, the Nevada Labor Commissioner. So the biggest violation, and one that in my tenure as a labor commissioner that just does not go away, even in a quote-unquote good economy and in a bad economy, is failure to pay wages and failure to pay overtime. So that is a consistent problem. Most employees in the state of Nevada are not making minimum wage, so minimum wage payment in Nevada is right around 4%. That's an estimate of the employees in Nevada. But putting that issue aside, whatever an employee is required to be paid based on their hourly rate, they are required to be paid. So it's just simply the failure to pay wages is our biggest issue. Failure to pay overtime. Nevada has a unique overtime requirement that if you make less than a certain amount, that's tied to the minimum wage. So minimum wage in Nevada, there was an increase that took effect July 1st, 2020. It is now $8 an hour if you are offered qualified health benefits, and $9 an hour if you are not offered qualified health benefits. And based on that minimum wage rate, depending upon your overtime schedule, if you work over 40 hours in a week or over 8 hours in a day, you might be eligible for overtime. So we have postings on our website that describe how that works. Again, the majority of employees in Nevada don't make minimum wage and don't fall into those overtime categories, but it's just the simple failure to not do the basics, as I like to describe it. Unfortunately, on the construction side, and I'm not going to get into it specifically, but there are situations where employees may not be here legally or may not know their rights. So unfortunately, we've had a lot of large cases on the contractor and construction side. And I will say this, a lot of them in northern Nevada for whatever reason, where we've had situations where we've had 20, 30 employees who worked on a large construction project and weren't paid for weeks at a time, and finally when they came into our office, finally learned their rights, that they could file a complaint and that they could pursue an avenue through the Nevada Labor Commissioner. We don't make any distinctions between whether somebody's here legally or illegally. We will handle a claim no matter what. That is different in other states, but in Nevada, we don't make that distinction. So, the biggest issue is you need to pay your employees. Again, there are situations where sometimes, a contractor or an employer may be having trouble making ends meet, and, it has every intention of paying the employee, but just doesn't have the funds at that moment. In those types of situations, we tell employers that you need to let us know, and the faster you let us know, the more we can address it on the other side, and maybe we won't impose administrative penalties. But in the cases where it's just plain intentional and intentionally not paying employees, that's when the $20,000, $30,000 administrative penalties come into play. And unfortunately, we are still seeing a lot of intentional situations where people just are not paying employees. The second part of that is failure to keep records. So in Nevada, you have to keep employment records for 2 years, and that means who the employee is, how much they were paid, all the other deductions, different things like that. That is requirement for 2 years. The legislature has tried to expand that requirement to up to 3 to 5 years, but right now it's 2 years. So if we get a claim or a complaint that comes in, an employee said, I haven't been paid for 2 weeks, or they're taking deductions out of my paycheck, and we contact the contractor or we contact the employer and they don't have any records, the burden of that is going to fall on the employer or the contractor, because by law you are required to keep those records. So I can't emphasize enough, document, keep good records. In certain situations too, we see where, it may be a family business, and let's say, the sister-in-law or the daughter are responsible for doing the accounting or for doing quote unquote the books, and the records are just not sufficient. And, that's where we will come in and say, look, we're willing to help you get caught up to speed on your records and how to maintain records, but we're going to have to impose an administrative penalty because you didn't follow the law. And again, sometimes that's intentional, sometimes it's just sloppy. But we are more than willing to come out, and we have done it. And I even hate to use the term audit, but we are more than willing to go out and sit with an employer and go through their records and tell them what they need to do, tell them what type of documentation they need. We also, in the time of COVID-19, have asked a lot of employers to do self-audits. So it may be a minor issue that we find, whether it's, not documenting deductions or maybe not paying correct overtime, having employers go back and do a 2-year self-audit, which they report back to us. If they do that properly and timely, we are willing to reduce and potentially, in some cases, waive the administrative penalties. But an absolute failure to not engage in that process may result in a subpoena or a referral to law enforcement. So just in the past 6 months, I think I've signed 6 subpoenas for records, just employers just outright failing to respond, failing to engage in the process, failing to even acknowledge that our office exists, and certainly understand that, but we have been much more aggressive in taking other steps to enforce Nevada labor laws, as opposed to just oh, we got a return letter, or oh, the employer didn't respond. Again, a subpoena goes through a different legal process, but we have referred cases to the Attorney General's office and to local district attorneys for employers who, again, just refuse to respond or engage in the process and are intentionally violating Nevada labor laws. So that's the worst case scenario. The other side of it is the best case scenario, where through training and engagement with our office, we get employers who may be new or who are just opening up a business on the right track. We inform them of Nevada's labor laws, kind of the unique aspects of minimum wage and overtime, what they need to do to keep records, where they can go with questions. And we always say, please contact us first. We're not out to play gotcha. The quicker and the sooner you engage with our office, the less likely you are to get in trouble, and the less likely you are to have a case that results in, like I said, a $20,000, $30,000 administrative penalty. Our website has a wealth of materials on all the different topics that we enforce. So we do a lot of training, again, on minimum wage and overtime. We also do a lot of training on the public works and prevailing wage side, which is obviously tied directly to contractors and the work that they perform on those projects. So we have done a lot of training on those issues. Obviously, with COVID-19 now, we can't do a lot of those in person, but we still try and do those, through the web and different things like that. And as Mr. Williams said, we work very closely, with the with the Contractors Board and also with the State Apprenticeship Council on those issues, and try to get outreach to the awarding bodies to monitor their projects and report issues to us.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next question is going to be for Mr. Bradford. Mr. Bradford is one of Nevada's labor attorneys. What are some of the trends that you're seeing with regard to labor issues within the construction industry? And among those, do you find that there is a general misunderstanding or lack of knowledge about what labor requirements are? Or on the reverse side, are contractors pretty well informed of the topic, but facing more serious situations that call for the involvement of legal counsel?
I'll answer the second set of questions first and then go back. I will echo the Labor Commissioner's sentiment that you have a mix of what's going on in terms of whether or not there's a need for more education with respect to the laws that govern how they're to conduct businesses, as well as situations where they may be well informed, but there may be some either factual questions. Fortunately, in my practice, I'm not coming across people who are intentionally flouting the law. Although we'll get into a little bit more in terms of the push and pull on some of those areas and how they may be tempted to do so, and how we can effectively advocate for individual contractors or employers generally to fall on the side of compliance. Now, with respect to some of the trends that are going on with respect to the construction industry, a lot of them are frankly similar to what is going on overall in employment. To again echo the labor commissioner, one of the things certainly swallowed up by COVID-19 as of late, but I should certainly underscore the implications of an increase in the minimum wage that employers had to plan for and has to execute. We talked about what the implications may be for daily overtime and what the thresholds may be in terms of those increases. But one of the specific issues that may arise with some employers is the question of how to qualify for the lower minimum wage. As you may have heard the labor commissioner speak, there are 2 tiers in Nevada for minimum wage. $9 an hour for those who, as a default, and for those who have a qualifying health plan, they may be entitled to avail themselves of a $1 per hour lower minimum wage. But what qualifies as a qualified health plan is something that's very intricate and not necessarily fairly easy. If your purpose is to try to avail yourself of that lower minimum wage by simply trying to shoehorn a qualified health plan, then you're going to find some difficulties if the dollar amount is your bottom line. For instance, one of the qualifications that trips up most employers, including contractors, is that the amount that the employee has to pay in premiums cannot exceed 10% of their gross wages. That does not, it does not matter whether or not a person elects a individual plan, individual with spouse, individual with children, or a family plan. That 10% cap still remains. So if all you're trying to do is avail yourself of that dollar per hour, then you're going to run into some issues there. So that's one of those things where you would need to engage with counsel and make sure that you're on the right path before paying someone or paying a group of individuals the dollar per hour minimum wage. You can imagine over a 2 to 3 year statute of limitations how that could lead to substantial exposure in terms of wages and hours that are not paid, in addition to the administrative penalties, as well as attorney's fees if you get into litigation. One of the other areas I wanted to highlight is with respect to documentation. One specific area in terms of failure to provide or provide payment for is the areas of meal and rest breaks. We have seen a fair amount of claims from employees that they are not receiving meal and rest breaks. And depending on how your operations may run, it may be easier or I guess commonplace for employers to say, well, we're generally going to make sure that you're getting your meals and rest breaks and don't necessarily go through the process of adequate documentation. As the labor commissioner suggested, sometimes I would suggest that it's certainly the person who brings the claims burden to establish that, but documentation is certainly going to place you in the best position. Remember that the Nevada wage and hour laws are designed to ensure that employees get paid for the work that they perform. So naturally, the labor commissioner's office is rightly going to aggressively enforce that law, but their mindset is going to be for employers to be able to show that they are in compliance. So that documentation is crucial, particularly if you can add that with an acknowledgement by the employee that they've had a chance through each pay period to confirm that they've received those meal and rest breaks. So we can at least have some affirmative proof that they acknowledge their right to receive such payment or such meal and rest breaks, or have in writing waived them for whatever reason. Another issue that has come up and that has been in effect since January 1st of 2020 is the requirement under NRS 608.0197 to provide 0.01923 hours of paid time off for every hour worked by employees, the paid time off. Many of the questions that have come up, at least with our client base, and I guess it's encouraging, is that many of our employers have already provided for that type of leave. And the question becomes, if the structure of the policies, whether it's collective bargaining agreements, employment agreements, or even just employee policies, are sufficient to avail themselves of a fairly broad exemption from the ability or the requirement to provide such leave in a manner that's directed by the statute. The statute had an exemption or a pretty broad carve out for those who had existing plans, because the legislative intent was not to require employees to or employers to simply adapt their entire long-standing programs to fit the statutory scheme. So we have worked with employers to ensure that it had already been in compliance and make adjustments with necessary to preserve that flexibility. Finally, the challenge of classification of workers, either as employees or independent contractors, is always looming. I empathize with employers who generally seek to follow industry norms in terms of such classifications. And I recognize that taking a more conservative approach may sometimes place the organizations at a competitive disadvantage, because we understand what the ramifications of you paying your workers as employees while everyone else in your industry paying the persons as independent contractors may be. Those have implications in terms of payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, whether or not you fall within your anti-discrimination and anti-harassment type statutory protections as well. So we certainly advise people to take a strong look and approach with caution before classifying a set of workers as independent contractors vis-a-vis an employee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bradford. Mr. Williams, as the state apprenticeship program is usually seen as a great opportunity for the apprentice, but it's equally as valuable for the employer. Can you share a little bit about the program's benefits for employers and also highlight some of the responsibility that employers have when taking on an apprentice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the biggest benefits for an employer is customized training is available based on the industry needs. Contractors can work with the program sponsor and enhance the training based on the needs of the industry. As everyone on this call knows, change dramatically all the time. So there's a lot of programs that are doing it now. They've been working, listening to their contractors, and been getting a lot of calls and helping some of the programs kind of draft their proposals for standards revisions, just to kind of enhance their curriculum. So I'm really happy about that. One of the other things is it's a safer workplace. Apprenticeship standards and the Apprenticeship Council, they insist on job sites are safe, through training, and they're laid out in the program standards. I think that's good for everybody. Safety is good. Everybody wants to come home at the end of the day, and it saves the contractors money in the long run. So time off of work for injuries and can be very expensive. So that's definitely something that's definitely a plus in the apprenticeship world. And then there's a systematic approach to training, which helps the retention of employees, saving contractors money again, while providing a path for a stable and reliable pipeline of workers. What better place to have training and workers is, in your own company, and to make sure that they, are getting the proper training and, they're actually out there to try to make money for you. So that's always important, and that's what apprenticeship is all about, is training the next generation of workforce for Nevada. So the second part of your question, so some of the responsibilities the contractors have when they take on apprentices are on public works projects, is making sure the apprentice is registered, as I touched on before, registered in the state of Nevada in an approved registered program. So basically, if that employee you're calling is an apprentice, and I'm just sticking with public works projects for a minute, if that employee you're calling an apprentice is not registered, then that employee is not an apprentice. And, Labor Commissioner can chime in if you like, but, they must be registered. And if they're getting turned in as an apprentice, and we're asked to do a verification of that apprentice, and we say no, then I believe the labor commissioner will basically judge that employee as a journeyman. So I don't think that's in anybody's interest, you know, to get extra money from somebody, but that's kind of the rule. So, you know, I just stress that, again, if you're calling somebody an apprentice, they must be registered in the state of Nevada. And that program you're affiliated with, that's who registers the apprentice. Then my office will verify that. So it's a pretty simple process, pretty straightforward, but I know there's been some confusion with that, and I do get a lot of phone calls. Contractors are calling, you know, different employees apprentices, but they're not. So, you know, and we certainly don't want a problem on our end, and I know the Labor Commissioner doesn't either, but that's definitely one of the responsibilities, just to kind of make sure that's being followed. You know, the other issue that comes up a lot is just to make sure that the required step increases that the program standards call for are being paid correctly. A lot of times the apprentice will, you know, finish different parts of his curriculum, his or her curriculum, and the step increases aren't given to that employee, and then just creates a payroll issue. And again, that could also land on the lap of the labor commissioner, but we try to mitigate that as much as possible. But I just stress that you know, it's, some of it's the apprentice's responsibility too, to make sure the contractor knows that there's a step increase that's coming because of certain curriculum that's been, you know, completed in the program. But, you know, sometimes that communication, there's a little breakdown there, but, you know, program standards call for an increase, and it needs to be paid. Another thing would be just to ensure that there's a safe work environment. Like I said before, everybody wants to come home at the end of the day. So safe job sites are definitely on the top of our priority list. We want to make sure everybody comes home. And then lastly, certainly not least, but make sure the apprentice is being trained in the skills outlined in the program curriculum. You know, I get calls a lot, you know, having an apprentice pick up the trash all day, sit in the trailer, do kind of ancillary job duties on the site, although sometimes it's necessary, but when it turns into 8, 16, 40 hours a week, that's not doing anybody any good. It's a disservice to the apprentice and also to the company as well. You know, the contractor wants a skilled workforce, and the apprentice wants to learn. So, you know, I just encourage, you know, everybody to mentor that apprentice. You know, everybody needs a push in the right direction sometimes. Some skills, you know, that the apprentice has may not be as good as, you know, the contractor expects it to be, but help that apprentice. And if there's an issue, let the program know. You know, we're all in this together. We definitely want a skilled workforce for the future. These apprentices are our future, especially in the construction industry, and we need to do everything we can to work together and make sure that they are getting the proper training, and you know, the contractor can be productive on the job sites as well.
Mr. Williams, it's come up a couple times in the chat room. A lot of our viewers are interested in learning about the apprentice ratios. Is that something you can elaborate on?
Yeah, every program with the occupations, every program has different ratios, so there's not a set ratio for everybody. It's a little different for every program, so it kind of depends on the occupation. But that's definitely something that needs to be followed as well. When we do our verifications for the apprentice, we include the, ratio on the verification form, so we verify that as well.
It looks like one of the specific questions was, she has one that states up to 5, what that means, 1 or 2 or 3, and then she says apprentice to journeyman. Sorry, I forgot to add that part. And I'm assuming that's a woman, so I apologize in advance if that's incorrect as well.
Yeah, up to 5 would mean up to 5. You know, if there's one apprentice for up to 5 journeymen, that means there'd be one apprentice for, you know, 2 journeymen, 3 journeymen. After 5, then the other section would kick in. I hope that answers the question. I know what they're asking, but I hope I answered that correctly.
No problem. We'll get
Journeyman,
them.
1 minute is required.
Okay, we'll let them chime in after the discussion if they need further clarity.
Sure.
So let's go back to the group as a whole. Changes in the economy can have a dramatic effect on the operations and financial circumstances of a business. Since the pandemic began, how have contractors most been impacted with respect to labor-related matters from your perspective? And has your agency implemented changes or new efforts during this time to aid contractors facing labor-related concerns?
I could start off with that if you'd like. That's Richard Williams.
Yes, please.
So from my perspective, there's an issue with training because of the in-person nature of instruction. So with the social distancing directives, it couldn't happen right now. So, our office took a proactive approach and developed an emergency policy allowing online and distance learning for all the registered programs. It was passed by the State Apprenticeship Council recently, and this ensures that the contractors can still get a trained workforce during this pandemic, and the apprentice doesn't get behind on his curriculum. So that was one of the things our office saw kind of in the beginning of this pandemic, and we kind of took an approach to just get this done before it gets to be a problem. So at least from my perspective, that's one of the biggest issues that I've seen. And, if I could add to that, there's been a lot of, positivity that's come out of that. We've gotten a lot of feedback, and a lot of the programs have utilized that, so I'm really happy to see that.
Commissioner Chambers? Are you still with us? How about Mr. Bradford? Did you want to chime in?
Sure. And let me start by recognizing that the changes in the economy has been challenging, to say the least, for all of our Nevada employers, particularly those in the construction industry. Fortunately, construction has largely been regarded as an essential business that has been able to keep going in some form or fashion, but there's no avoiding the fact that just the overall contracting of the economy because of the COVID-19 crisis led to a plethora of decisions that employers have had to make to either just kind of preserve their livelihoods in general, or at least keep things viable from a financial perspective. They've had to make difficult decisions regarding whether and to what extent to engage in furloughs and layoffs, and if so, if in a mass enough quantities, how to comply with the Federal WARN Act, which requires adequate notice prior to mass layoffs. When do you provide, or when are you apprised of the notification of being in a position where you would have to engage in those mass layoffs? For those employers that remain, or the employees that remain, employers have to determine how to promulgate and implement measures aimed at keeping the workplace safe. They've been required to manage employee absences for reasons ranging from illness to, as I mentioned before, distance learning and child care limitations, to continued fears associated with COVID-19, including two completely new developed on the fly federal legislation under the FFCRA regarding time off from work paid in order to deal with COVID-19 diagnoses, testing, illnesses, mandated quarantines, inability to keep children in the schools because of school closures, things of that nature. So there's just been a whole cacophony of different employment law considerations in this economy that employers have had to deal with. And let me not forget, the increased emphasis with Nevada OSHA, particularly with respect to enforcing either complaints or spot inspections with respect to social distancing, sanitation procedures, and other measures that are aimed at keeping employees safe in the workplace. So, of course, our aim or our role in those developments and responding to those developments is being able to provide, basically spot counsel to employers as they have navigated those issues. It's funny, litigation has gone down. It will pick back up as people are getting either back into the workplaces or finding out that they have been permanently let go. You'll have a lot of dissatisfied employees and will seek administrative as well as court measures for seeking such redress. But from a proactive perspective, a lot of what we've done, in the months ranging from March through July has been that advice and counsel in terms of, well, how do I deal with the employee that is simply fearful, either through just what they've heard in the news or because they know that they have a compromised immunity system or they have people in the home that are immunocompromised and therefore are unwilling or unable to return to the workplace. How does that interplay with certain job titles? In many office organizations or office environments, you may have the ability to work from home. In a construction environment, the number of jobs that are available to do that, that have that as an option, I would imagine are quite a bit diminished from a regular office environment. So how do you manage that? Do you terminate the employee or do you provide unpaid leave? So there's just, again, a number of issues that we aim to walk with employers, including contractors, on even just on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Commissioner Chambers, are you back on with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Were you able to hear the question that we're on?
I did. Sorry about that. Somehow I dropped off. So just kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Bradford said. So some of the first issues that we saw was obviously when businesses had to shut down was the decision of whether that employer was going to keep that employee on the books, so to speak, or were they going to lay them off. The Nevada Labor Commissioner does not have authority over unemployment, so that obviously has been a big issue in the state of Nevada. That spillover from the dissatisfaction with the employment division has led to just huge amounts of call volume for our office, and again, a lot of unhappy people, but just trying to explain to them that we do not have jurisdiction over that. But kind of tying into that issue is advising employers of, Nevada is a right to work state. You do have a right to terminate employment. We never encourage just terminating employment without notice or without cause, but under the law, you do have that authority. So unfortunately, in the past 6 months, I've had to use that phrase probably more than once, that you do have the right to terminate employment. So, again, not a phrase I like to say, but, this is something we're in uncharted waters in different times, and just the simple issues of, kind of going to Mr. Bradford's point, the simple issues of employees going on vacation or what employees are doing on the weekend. Is it safe to have them back in the office? Those types of questions. So that's certainly been an interesting road to go down with employers and employees. And again, just issues that there's really no bright line, and you try and give reasonable advice. I would say on the construction side and the contractor side, that was deemed to be an essential industry and has stayed operating and stayed running, and has done a wonderful job of, in my view, adapting to the OSHA rules and adapting to the requirements that the governor laid down. That does have a spillover into public works and prevailing wage issues. We're seeing a lot of contractors who are bidding for the first time on public works and prevailing wage projects, and they are not familiar with the laws that govern those projects. They're not familiar with the Apprenticeship Utilization Act that Mr. Williams spoke to, that there are certain requirements now for the utilization of apprentices on public works projects. So we're seeing a lot of cases where, quite frankly, people just don't know what they're doing. So what I try and tell those contractors is, we're more than supportive of contractors performing work and bidding on public works and prevailing wage projects, but you need to be familiar with the laws, and you really need to know what you're doing on those projects because they are funded with public funds. The penalties on those projects go all the way from administrative penalties all the way to potential disqualification. So we do disqualify contractors, and you know, the way the law reads is technically that if there is a violation, you are subject to a disqualification of 3 years for the first offense, 5 years for the second offense from being awarded a public works contract. Now, it's always the fine line as the labor commissioner, again, of are these contractors doing this intentionally or are they not doing it intentionally? I will tell you that the issue of misclassification on public works and prevailing wage projects does not go away. So, for example, the scope of the contract or the work is electrical work and the employee is being paid as a laborer. That is not authorized by the law. You have to pay the prevailing wage rate based on the work performed. So those issues continue. And again, the level sometimes of just pure ignorance versus this being intentional is something we always evaluate when we pursue a case or a claim. We also receive a lot of complaints from outside entities who do monitor the projects. Our office, for those of you that know, we are extremely small, so 9 investigators for the entire state of Nevada, and certainly the COVID situation has thrown a monkey wrench of, you know, having investigators out on job sites and different things like that. So we do rely on some of the trade organizations, the unions, other contractors to inform us of contractors that are not doing what they should be doing on the projects. The issue of having apprentices out there that may not be verified or may not be given the proper training is an issue that's coming up more and more. Again, working with the state apprenticeship director, state apprenticeship council, and the awarding bodies, trying to make sure that they know what they're doing and getting the proper documentation. And, you know, I always say that if you follow the rules and follow the law, you won't have any problems. And, you know, you may never have an issue with our office, but we certainly are seeing a lot more contractors out there bidding on public works and prevailing wage projects, and they really, really need to study the laws, study the forms that they need, study how to submit certified payroll reports, because again, these are the types of cases that can result in potential disqualification from being awarded future public works and prevailing wage contracts. And the labor commissioner, certainly, if that is a necessary action that we need to take, we will take it. The other thing I would say is don't get over your head and don't be afraid to ask the question, because if you are working on a project for 4 to 6 months and you pay all the employees wrong for that entire 4 to 6 months, you could be looking at forfeitures and penalties in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the quicker you address the issue, the quicker you ask the questions, the better off you will be, because we have seen some extremely large cases, again, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The other side of that is tying it directly to the state contractors board, as we can refer it to them and they may pursue something with your license. So again, we encourage people to follow the rules. We will give you the tools to follow the rules, and you know, if you don't, there are consequences to that. And you know, while we can't be at every project all the time, we do have very, very good working relationships with the trade organizations, with the unions, on all sides, with the non-union trade organizations, and we rely on a lot of those agencies and entities to provide us information on the potential bad actors out there. My final point about the COVID situation, and I hate to use this phrase too, but there needs to be sort of a re-engagement of the employer-employee relationship. We've gone through a very interesting time, whether it's through telework or, you know, different requirements on the construction side and different leave requirements. There does need to kind of be a re-engagement of the employer-employee relationship and how we're going to move forward and what our leave policies are going to be and different things like that. So I've encouraged employers and employees that as you're bringing people back or as you're adding new staff, really sit down and have that conversation and look at your policies, look at your procedures. To Mr. Bradford's point, there is probably going to be litigation on the other side of this whenever we get to that other side, but I would encourage all of you you know, on the contractor side to really, again, talk to your employees, make sure you're all on the same page, and make sure that you know how you're going to handle this situation going forward. And in the event that something like this comes up again, hopefully we'll all be better prepared and better ready.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple questions did come about the COVID, and I know we have kind of one final question for the panel that'll discuss the agency's resources that you guys offer, but I wanted to make sure we address these. We have about 10-15 minutes left. Specific to COVID, what are kind of the guidelines for employers on that? I know that's kind of a large question to ask, but specifically, are employers allowed to require an employee to go get tested and report those results? Can you just provide some maybe general guidelines that you've been communicating with contractors or employers? And anybody's welcome to chime in. That was just kind of posed during the discussion.
I think that was
So let me just, go ahead, Mr. Bradford.
Oh, please, after you.
So I'll be real quick. So the federal government in late March passed the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which provided for 80 hours of federal emergency paid sick leave, and we have a bulletin on our website about that. I mean, essentially, if an employee has symptoms, yes, they can have time off to go get tested, and the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission said that, yes, you can ask the employee to test and return to work. Now, you know, Mr. Bradford may have a different view on that, but they, you know, typically an employee will say, you know, I need to go get tested. Not always, but we'll say I need to go get tested, I need time off. But as an employer, you do have the right to ask for the test. But again, you know, there's limitations on that too that could go down 1,000 different roads, but that's what we've been advising employers. So go ahead, Mr. Bradford.
Yes, actually, that's an excellent point to jump from. That's correct. The FFCRA provides a starting point, particularly with respect to an employee that believes that they may have been exposed to coronavirus or may have been exhibiting symptoms of coronavirus. And yes, under the FFCRA, there's up to 80 hours of leave that's provided there. But let's say for some reason that they have already exhausted that amount of hours, but there is still the need for leave. As a matter of principle, you still may want to engage in the interactive process, almost like a quasi Americans with Disabilities Act type of analysis, to work with the employees to see how they can continue to make sure that they're being taken care of with respect to, you know, either mitigate the spread or limit exposure to COVID-19, even if on an unpaid leave status. Keep in mind that PTO may be, you know, pursuant to your policies or CBAs, may be an alternative resource to use as well for those types of reasons in terms of illness. Remember that under NRS 608.0197, there is not a stated reason that needs to be given for any type of PTO that is to be used. Again, to ensure the safety of the remainder of the workforce upon returning to work, it is advisable to, or allowable at least, to require employees to present evidence that they are not afflicted with coronavirus before returning to work. In addition, you can implement measures such as either questionnaires or even thermal testing, so long as you do it to everyone. So what you do not want to do, and what some employers may have done or may have considered doing that would be erroneous, is limiting such types of inquiries or medical exams to people who are above a certain age or fit other categories that would make them more susceptible to acute symptoms if they were to be afflicted with coronavirus. Those could certainly run afoul of ADA or even Title VII when you think of, or the ADEA, when you think about age or how coronavirus has disproportionately affected communities of color. You don't want to get into that trap. So whatever measure you may implement as part of exposure mitigation for everyone, you want to make sure that it applies across the board equally to everyone.
Thank you. And we've had quite a few inquiries come in as well about the Public Works project. So for both Commissioner Chambers and Mr. Williams, specifically the individuals would like to know about the mandatory apprenticeship process. If there's a checklist that has required forms or timelines that need to be filed and how they go about requesting apprentices and that information. And then lastly, third part of that question will be about layoffs. If an apprentice is laid off, is the employer responsible for paying unemployment? I'll kind of leave that up to both of you, but those are some of the questions we've been receiving.
So on our website, there is an entire tab devoted to the Apprenticeship Utilization Act that has guidelines, that has forms, that has basically everything that a contractor would need to comply with Senate Bill 207 and the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. The other component of this is, as the contractor, you need to work with the public body and the awarding body on completing those forms and completing the process, because it's only the public body that can request a waiver from Senate Bill 207 if it's needed. But we have an entire tab on our website. So if you go to www.labor.nv.gov, there's Apprenticeship Utilization Act tab at the very top, and it has advisory opinions, all the forms, all the information. If you have additional questions, you can send it to mail1@labor.nv.gov, and I monitor that mailbox, so you will get an answer. And believe me, I've probably answered over 3,000 questions about the Apprenticeship Utilization Act since January, so happy to answer them, but please look at those materials first, because it will probably answer a lot of your questions.
Mr. Williams, did you have anything else to add to that? Maybe we lost Mr. Williams in the process. All right, well, I don't know. I do see.
Hey there.
Welcome.
Sorry.
No problem.
I just want to chime in really quick. So kind of piggyback on what the Labor Commissioner said. So, I get a lot of calls also about that, and, various other aspects of, training programs and the standards. I encourage all the contractors to just reach out to the programs that you're affiliated with, and just improve that communication, because it's amazing when there's communication how easily things get fixed and get understood. And that's one of the first questions I always ask when I'm asked a question about any of the programs or standards is, well, did you reach out to the program and discuss your issue with them? Well, no. So my first question is, well, why not? And I try to help, get that communication. If there is an issue, I try to help as much as I can, the contractor and the program, improve that communication. So that's one takeaway I would like to just share with everybody.
And on the unemployment question, Mrs. Lewis, I don't know specifically what the law is on that, just based on what I know about unemployment and having had to learn about it. My guess would be if that person's considered an employee, they might be eligible for some form of unemployment, and that would be the position that I would go on. Okay.
And then very quickly, Mr. Williams, regarding the apprenticeship ratio or the apprentice ratios, the specific situation that one of our viewers has is that their job requires an apprentice, and the 1-to-1 ratio is met with a salary superintendent who doesn't appear on the LCP upload. How do they record the salary superintendent's hours to be in compliance?
I might refer that question to the Labor Commissioner, because
I think you might have an issue there, and I would probably need to know more about the situation. But you could have a potential issue there of compliance. So my recommendation would be to put that in an email to our office, again, mail1@labor.nv.gov.
Okay, perfect. Well, that wraps up, it looks like, from our attendees' questions that have been coming in through the chat, and I know we're running out of time. So lastly, I just wanted to kind of give you guys one more opportunity to talk about some of the key resources that contractors and employers should be aware of with regard to your agency, and how best they can utilize those.
I could start. So really quick. So as far as the State Apprenticeship Council in my office, there's a couple websites I like to direct everybody to. The first one would be lifeworksnv.org. lifeworksnv.org. That was just relaunched recently by Owen, and it's essentially a work-based learning hub. There's a lot of resources on there available, to businesses and those seeking a career path. The other website would be our main website, owen.nv.gov. There's a lot of info on there about registered apprenticeship programs. There's a wealth of information related to workforce development in Nevada. And that website's a work in progress, but we're always looking to improve it, and we're in the process of improving it. But those two websites, at least from my perspective, will offer a lot of resources, a lot of information to everyone.
And I would just offer from the Labor Commissioner's Office, our website, same thing, www.labor.nv.gov. We have a wealth of information on there, from minimum wage to overtime to private employment agencies to public works, the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. We have a separate mailbox for the Apprenticeship Utilization Act that's on our website for public works. Again, our general one, mail one at labor.nv.gov, but please reach out to us and contact us, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and give you the guidance that you need.
And finally, I encourage everyone to, again, visit our website, www.fisherandphillips.com. Adjustments that are necessary as a result of COVID-19 aren't going away soon. And our website is chocked with a bunch of information, a comprehensive COVID-19 resource center for employers, as well as industry and practice area insights. And then finally, from a local perspective, we aim to, as changes in the law arise or changes in events arise that may affect the laws, we aim to put out legal alerts that will apprise those readers to any type of changes that you need to be aware of that may at least lead you to ask questions or to give us a call about what changes may be afoot that would affect your workplace. So please feel free to do that. The bios of everyone in the Las Vegas office's team is also there. So if you have specific questions, you can certainly feel free to reach out to us and we can address whatever you need.
Mr. Bradford, I apologize. Did you provide a website or anything that I could share in the chat room?
Yes, it's fisherphillips.com.
You got it. Sorry, I missed that.
No worries.
I'm sorry. Unless there are any other questions, it looks like we did have, is there any information regarding diversity with regard to labor issues that would be of importance to the industry?
Generally speaking, I would just certainly encourage you to the extent that you're dealing with any type of projects that may involve the federal government, general references to comply with your OCCFP requirements, your demographics recording and submissions to the appropriate agencies there. Not as much from the state perspective that I'm aware of, but we can certainly, if there's more specific questions, I'd be happy to address that offline via an email as well.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments from the panelists, I just wanted to thank you again on behalf of the Contractors Board for taking the time to join us today. At this time, we're going to take a brief intermission to get our next set of panelists on board. So I will ask the current panelists to please go off of video, our next set of panelists to please come on to video, and then we will be happy to start here in about 5 minutes.
Thank you much.
Thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
I would like to thank all the panelists as well. Thank you so much for joining us. If you don't stick around for the rest of the presentation, we really appreciate having you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Jennifer, this is Sam. It says I can't start video because you've stopped it.
Let me correct that, Mr. Palmer, just for a moment.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer, what is your name on your feed?
I see it up on the screen. It's Sam Palmer.
There you are.
Got it?
Okay.
There's Sam's smiling face. Good morning.
All right, well, since everybody is on board, I say we just go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Just as we did with yesterday, or excuse me, the previous panel, again, this is our contractor compliance panel. I'm gonna go ahead and take this screen share off of here, and hopefully we don't run into that issue we just had a moment ago. But to start, could you guys please share a little bit about yourself and the relationship your agency has with the construction industry?
This is Sam Palmer. I'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
Overall, I'm the chairperson for the Nevada Organization of Building Officials. We represent all the building departments throughout the state of Nevada. And my day job is the assistant director for Clark County Department of Building and Fire Prevention. As such, as the building officials, we are the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction. We oversee all of the construction laws as it relates to new construction, remodeling construction, anything that you want to build that has an occupiable structure. If people are inside the building, then eventually we oversee the construction and the operations and the maintenance of that building. In our department here in Clark County, we have two sides. We have the building department side and we have the fire prevention side. Fire prevention is not the fire department. Fire department, they have all the engines, et cetera. Fire prevention is very similar to building. We have the plans checkers, the engineers, the fire inspectors, and we do a similar function just like building, to make sure that the structures are safe. As such, we generate over 50,000 plus permits a year, and we do more than 275,000 inspections per year. So, I mean, we stay busy. And even in these COVID times, you know, the governor called us construction as an essential business. We've stayed very busy. So we're out there, we're out there to help the organizations and the contractors in particular to get the job built as safe as possible and in general accordance with the approved plans and specifications. But in a nutshell, that's who we are.
Mr. Rosario?
Good morning. My name is Paul Rosario. I'm the Director of Investigations for the Nevada State Contractors Board. The Nevada State Contractors Board, we license all the contractors in the state of Nevada. Those are those contractors that could be anywhere from, you know, that are involved with building, landscaping, painting, pools, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. That's what we do. As far as Director of Investigations, we investigate all complaints that come in relative to licensed and unlicensed contractors. Right now we're roughly about 2,600 complaints a year that we're looking at between licensed and unlicensed contractors that are coming in. Between those, we have two offices, one office up in Reno and one here in Henderson. Our investigators are both, we have compliance investigators and criminal investigators and fraud investigators. We also investigate construction fraud claims that are brought up against licensed contractors that are suspected of or alleged to be involved with some sort of construction fraud. One of the other things that we do is we are the investigators subsequent to the Residential Recovery Fund. It's a fund that's within the state that all residential contractors pay into. If a claim is brought forth from a homeowner against a contractor for the recovery fund, we investigate that claim and put forth a recommendation to the committee whether or not to approve or deny the claim. We are, and on the criminal side, as I stated, we look at fraud cases, which we can charge criminally, and we have done that. We also, regarding unlicensed contractors, we can charge them file criminal charges against them with the respective district attorney's offices. So we're very busy. We have investigators, like I said, in the north and the south that handle the whole state, and you know, we're there to serve the public, to ensure, as our mission states, to ensure the integrity of the industry as well as protection of the public. So that's what the board does.
Thank you, Mr. Rosario. And just, it sounds like some of our panelists are having, or our audience are having trouble hearing. So just a reminder if we could try to speak up just a little bit. Mr. Mcguire, did you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, this is Paul Mcguire. I'm the head of engineering for the State Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission of Nevada is the entity responsible for enforcement of Nevada's one-call law, which essentially means if you're excavating or digging, you're supposed to, call in. 811 is the national number to get a ticket. The lines are located for free. Every utility is required to be a member and mark those lines. And within 2 days, all lines should be marked. So we enforce that when we have complaints or when incidents occur on both excavators and operators. Both can be in violation of the law. The excavator not calling, the operator not properly marking. And, just a couple of highlights. We have a natural gas damage dig-in every day. Somewhere today in this state, somebody will dig into a natural gas line. There will be an emergency response. Trucks will have to roll. Most of them do not result in large incidents, but they can. But just in context, in 2000, we used to have 5 damages a day. So we've really cut that down. Southwest Gas, NV Energy, the contractors, the word's getting out, people call, and it's just vital. This is our infrastructure. With kids Zooming, everything's over the internet these days. We can't have the fiber lines being dug into because a contractor needs to get a job done and can't call in. So I'll get into more specifics later, but that's essentially what we do.
Thank you. How about you, Ms. Harman? Excuse me.
There we go. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you. Hi, I'm Lisa Harman. I'm the operations manager at NV Energy, and I oversee the applications that the contractors put in for solar interconnection or energy storage and electric vehicle charging stations as well. So we review these applications and make sure that the contractor is compliant with licensing, the monetary license limit and the contract limit, for example. And so we work with them to make sure that the application is correct. And, we want to work together with the contractors to ensure the safety and satisfaction of our mutual customers. And as Paul just touched on, obviously safety is a huge issue, the call before you dig. We really encourage that when they're doing the solar construction. So I can get into the details of what we look for in the application process as we proceed here, but that's my role.
Great, thank you. All right, so Mr. Rosario, for those that don't know, the Contractors Board investigates nearly 3,000 complaints against licensed and unlicensed contractors each year. Can you highlight some of the trends you're seeing among licensed contractor complaints and also share your insights on ways contractors can help proactively mitigate some of these issues? I should note, sorry, I did mute you, so you'll have to unmute yourself. I apologize. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that we've seen recently, and we hope it's not something that is going to continue, but we've had a number of contractors that we summarily suspended. That means the staff took action upon by the executive officer to suspend a license based on a number of cases or a number of complaints that came up, and the investigations validated the suspension. Our concern about that, obviously, is the number of homeowners that potentially could be harmed and subsequently the potential effect on the residential recovery fund. Not to mention, we don't want a contractor who is potentially underwater to continue to contract with homeowners collect fees, and then not deliver. So that's a concern that we do have. We haven't seen it, I would say, the last couple of weeks, but we had seen it in the last month and a half prior to that, which is concerning to us, where maybe last year we had no summary suspensions, and this year we've had a few. So, but those few can significantly affect a number of homeowners, which is concerning. One thing that, regarding the trends, we've seen actually this past fiscal year compared to last fiscal year, a decrease in workmanship complaints, a decrease in money owing, which is really interesting for us. We thought that with the pandemic, with the potential effect on the construction economy, that we may have potentially seen more, especially on the money owing side, but we haven't as of yet, which is, I think, a very, very positive thing. So our complaints are actually down from last year to this year, which is very, very positive. I think one thing that contractors can do to proactively mitigate some of the potential problems is to really, really work with the homeowners in trying to resolve complaints. And I'll tell you this right now, it's very interesting what's happening out there. I think people are, at the edge of the cliff, some people, and includes homeowners as well as contractors. And we're finding a number of very contentious relationships between those parties. And we're finding that oftentimes that we're being stepped into a situation where we're trying to really resolve these problems, and both sides are very adversely apart from one another. But I think the overwhelming majority of the contractors are doing a great job in resolving the complaints they have with the homeowners. But it just seems that it's, for us, as far as the investigators that are out there, we're finding it's some of these homeowners are very, very difficult to work with. I think a number of reasons is that, when the pandemic started, we stopped our job site visits for approximately a little over 2 months. And that put things, a lot of homeowners at a very, very, I think, stressful situation in which, they had a complaint. They understood why we couldn't go out there because of the pandemic. But obviously their issue wasn't resolved. Now, a number of contractors did step up and resolve those issues during that time without us even conducting a job site visit, and which I think is great. But I think it's one of those things where we're at a very interesting time. We just have to, as far as the board is concerned, and what we encourage the contractors to have extreme amount of patience with the homeowners, really try to work with them, try to resolve the problem the best they potentially can. So one thing. Also, we found that industrial regulation complaints, that would be complaints from maybe DIR, from building departments relative to no permits or not having industrial insurance. Those complaints are down from the previous year as well. So I think overall, it's a very interesting time. I think the most important thing that as I stated, is that really for contractors to, communicate with their homeowners, with their customers, and really try to resolve any potential problems. Contracts are very important. Make sure your contracts are solid. They're very well, detailed as far as what the scope of work is. So, and that they communicate the expectations with the homeowner as far as what the work is going to be done and how that work is going to look. It's when, a number of times what we're finding now is that homeowners, they're not happy with the minimum standards of the industry. They expect more. They're paying more, or they think they're paying more, and they expect more. And we look at the minimum standards of the industry relative to, lippage on tile, relative to potential, installation of, windows or doors. But they seem to, maybe their expectations are a little too high sometimes. And I think there's got to be good communication between the homeowner and the contractor in resolving these problems. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Palmer. Building departments play a vital role in Nevada's construction industry. In addition to permitting issues, can you please discuss some of the other services or requirements that contractors need to be aware of to stay in compliance with local building laws? Mr. Palmer, you're muted. Let me see if I can unmute. There you go. I unmuted you.
Very good, thank you. Overall, staying in compliance with the laws, with the requirements of the permits, that's one of the biggest issues we have with a few of the contractors. Contractors definitely need to be aware that the permit is a legal document. We only grant those permits out by law to a licensed contractor that's capable of doing that work. If they're not licensed or they're not capable of doing the work, that permit cannot be issued to them. So when the permits are out there, it grants the contractor the right or the ability to perform the work. As such, it's their responsibility to understand what needs to be done. The scope of that permit, it may say electrical, building, mechanical, plumbing, whatever it may be, and we have an approved set of plans, but it's the contractor's project. They need to know the job much better than we do. As an inspector, as a building official, when I walk on the job site, I'll have a pretty good feel or idea of what's going on, but it's the contractor that should know that job inside and out and not rely upon us to help do his homework and how to figure out issues. Now, that said, we're always glad to assist, especially if there's difficult situations and whatnot, or alternate means or methods. What's the best way to do it? But that permit is a legal document that grants him that ability to do the work, and as such, we expect the contractor to be knowledgeable. And when we go on the job sites, again, we're there to assist and to help. And we'll check and make sure that the work is being done in accordance with the plans, approved plans, whatnot. But it's up to the contractor to take good care of that. And, in general terms, overall, the key issue I can tell everybody right now is have a little patience. Things have changed. We are all trying to get back up to speed. I don't care if it's Clark County or Henderson or Las Vegas or Washoe County or Pioche, wherever it may be, everything has changed. And as such, all of us, contractors included, still have the staff either working from home, working remotely, however best possible, or we're now gone almost all 100% electronic. Things have changed. We're trying to get back up to speed. Good open communications. If you've submitted something to us or you've got questions in the field or whatnot, call us. We'll be glad to come out. We'll be glad to discuss over the phone, but give us a call. We're glad to do a second opinion. If you think the inspector's too tough or whatnot, or has a difference of opinion, let us know. We're glad to take a look at it. My own personal opinion is we're there to help to assist that project get built in a safe and sane manner in accordance with the plans and the specs. So good communications is still very critical to us. Overall, what we're seeing right now, in particular in the pandemic times, is please don't start the work without a permit. People like to push the envelope, and I understand that, and time is of the essence, but the permit is the legal document that says, yes, you are granted the right to build that structure in accordance with the approved plans and specs. Without the issuance of the permits, we don't have a choice. I mean, that is a legal concern that must be satisfied. You have to have that permit in hand. We don't really do courtesy inspections, but give us a call. We'll come out and take a look, see where you're at on the construction. But we need that permit in hand to get the process going. One of the other key issues, on the TCO/CO side of the house, the temporary certificate of occupancy and the certificate of occupancies. Those were legal statements that are being made in accordance with that permit. Contractor receives a permit, they build the structure. At the very end, once all of the inspections are done, and that's not just the building department. There's about 19, well, actually, there's about 21 different inspections or agencies that have to sign off on a permit. Building department, we sign off on the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, the building, the architectural, the structural, the QAA. But you've got outside agencies. You've got the water district, water reclamation, health department, multiple other folks that all tie into that process and do that official sign off until we can issue that certificate of occupancy. the certificate of occupancy grants the owner or the occupant the legal right to be in there. And if the project is not built or not completed yet, legally, they should not be in that structure. As the contractor, that's your permit. You're the owner operator of that permit, that construction site. And if you allow individuals to occupy that structure prior to TCO being granted or CO being granted, that we have serious issues with, and that just can't happen. There's a life safety issues that have to be met. So please, as a contractor, be aware of your TCO and the CO process and what needs to be done to make sure we understand, what's legal and what can be done. We're also seeing a few questionable business practices out there. As the AHJ, our job is to make sure that the buildings are built in accordance with the plans and specs. We don't get involved in the contracts, et cetera, between the owners, whoever it may be, and the contractor. But we are starting to see a few more very questionable contracts or concerns come up. We refer over to State Contractors Board, and and typically we can work through it. But echoing Paul's remarks, please work with your customers, get it resolved before it becomes a major issue and it comes to the building department side of the house, the Contractors Board, et cetera. I mean, that's good business practice. So we are starting to see a little bit more of that. But overall, work with us. We're glad to help. Sometimes I understand it is tough to get in contact with us, but please give us a call. We'll jump and we'll make sure we're out there to meet you. I go out almost on a daily basis to look at the job sites and try and help the situations so we can keep the progress rolling so everybody can do well. So those are some of the general concerns that I've seen here lately.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Mcguire, can you please share the importance of the PUC's Call Before You Dig program that you highlighted earlier and the public safety concerns that your agency addresses when contractors fail to do so? Also, in what ways does the PUC discipline or penalize contractors who fail to meet your requirements?
Sure. The 811 or the Call Before You Dig law is out there to protect the state's infrastructure. We paid a lot of money to have this stuff put in: internet, electric, gas, water, sewer, and it needs to be protected. So there's a free service. All excavators, if they call 811 or go online, can get those lines marked for free. They just got to wait the 2 business days, and that's 2 days from the day they call. You can't call at 4 o'clock and say that's day 1. You have to give the operators time to do that. And the importance is just that infrastructure is vital, especially in today's world. It's even more vital, and it needs to stay in good working shape. So people call, the lines get marked, and then excavators have the responsibility to use hand tools in and around those facilities as they're crossing them, going under them, or going across them, because shovel won't damage it. You just can't go in there with a backhoe. Although some of these guys are really good, you can hit it, you can damage it, so you have to use hand tools. A lot of the things we're seeing too are concrete stakes, tree stakes, solar ground rods. People who say, well, I'm not excavating. Well, you're driving a 2-foot stake into the ground. How do you know there's not something there? So we're trying to get that word out that, if you're putting in a fence post or if you're putting in sidewalk forms or things like that, you're putting your workers at risk, you're putting your clients at risk, you're putting the public at risk if you're just randomly driving rods into the ground and you don't know what's there. I do want to highlight that as important as calling and using hand tools is if you hit a line, what to do after. It's always stopping the incident's one, but what you do after the incident is just as important. And if it's a gas line or if it's electric line, you got to get people away from the area. You got to call 911. You can't just call the operator, because a lot of times the fire department's much closer than the operator. They deal with this all the time, so you have to call 911 from a safe area. And then you can call the operator after 911. What you can't do, and what we see far too often, is Joe Backhoe jumping in the trench, folding over the 90-pound blowing gas line, trying to tape it up. If you've ever watched the utility get in there and stop a gas leak, they have full respirators, they have full fire suits, they're tethered, the fireman's got them on a rope to pull them out. You've got 2 fire crews backing them up with hoses. You just can't have people go in there. And I know they're saying, well, I'm worried about the gas. Well, that's why you evacuate everybody and you call 911. You jumping in there is just putting more people at risk, because if it ignites, or if you happen to pass out because of the displacement of the oxygen, now we have a real problem, as opposed to just some gas blowing in the air and stinking up the neighborhood for a little bit. The other thing that is very important is, just don't run away. A lot of times contractors leave the scene. Well, that isn't doing anybody any good, because a lot of times you have facts that, yeah, that house, no, the homeowner's not there. Well, if you know that, then the fire department knows, okay, I got to go in, but I might not have to evacuate because the contractor told me the homeowner they're working for isn't there. You have vital information, so don't just call 911 and drive away. Just regarding the discipline, we try to use a proactive approach. We try to use education, verbal warnings in the field when we investigate these damages. And a lot of times people just don't know. And if you explain to them and they know who to call and they know how to use hand tools, we never see those people again. Then we get some repeat offenders who we often send letters to reminding them, and both Southwest Gas, NV Energy, and all the utilities have a consortium called the Nevada Regional Common Ground Alliance, and they do training on how to properly call and protect lines. It's nrcga.org, so that's a good resource. And if that doesn't work, then we have the ability to fine. The commission assessed 33 civil penalties last year to contractors, and to be honest, it's mainly them just saying, well, I don't have time to call, or it's going to take too long to hand dig. And that's not an excuse. I get that time is money, but so is the infrastructure that you're hitting. They were there first. If you've got to put in new infrastructure or put something in, you've got to adhere that somebody's there, somebody needs that infrastructure. Yes, you're allowed to work around it, but you got to do it with care and caution. You just can't say, well, 4 hours for me to hand dig this, I'll take the chance. We see that far too often. And every once in a while you get an incident like happened last year outside of LA, where the solar contractor drove the ground rod in, it leaked, it blew up the house, and you have a fatality. Those are very rare, but you're dealing with either high voltage lines, flammable products, high pressure liquids, all things that can hurt people. So it's just vital that if you're an excavator, you got to know the rules. You just can't know the basic rules. You got to know the state's one-call law.
Mr. Mcguire, we did have one question that came in for you. Does 811 cover house lines beyond the meter on personal property?
That's a good question, and the answer is no, because 811 is for operators. The homeowner, if they own a well in the back and have an electric line, nobody's going to know where that line is. The utilities are required to give the 811 service, which in Nevada is USA North, detailed maps and zones of where their lines are, so that when you call, they know which utilities have lines in the area, and then those people can go out with the maps to mark. The homeowner is not a member of USA North. So USA North doesn't know if this home has a customer-owned yard line and this one doesn't. What I would say to the homeowner is you can hire a private locator. They can come in and find that, and that's vital as part of your house record. Or you should ask, if you purchase a home and it has a well pump or maybe a barbecue pit out in the back that has a gas line, that you ask the prior owner, hey, where is that? Because that's your line. that's not Southwest Gases or NV Energy, they end at the meter. They will mark to the meter every time you call. But if you have gas lines in your backyard to pools, tiki torches, you name it, those are yours and nobody else knows where they are.
And one more question that came in for you. Can you speak on what to do if you nick the outer sheath on a telephone line?
Yeah, and I'm glad that came up, because that's the other thing we see happen is people nick lines, say, it doesn't look that bad, put tape on it or something, and they just bury it. They're not qualified to know whether that damaged the fiber, damaged the grounding on the electrical cable, or took away a lot of the pipe components such that you're going to cause a leak. Or maybe you caused a leak and it's small and you don't know about it. So call the utility on those. If it's not leaking, if it's not sparking, you don't need to call 911, but call the utility. Most of the time, the utility will thank you, won't even bill you, because they don't want to find it later after it's leaked into somebody's basement or customer has lost internet service. They'd much sooner come out when you have it exposed. You show them where the nick is. They're going to probably tell you, hey, you were using hand tools, good job, maybe be a little bit more careful, and they'll fix it. But yeah, we have far too many people bury damages thinking that they've repaired them and they're okay.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go ahead and
Jen, you're muted.
thank you, Ms. Green. It's fun to talk to yourself. Ms. Harman, those familiar with solar construction practices understand the complexities involved in these contracts. Can you walk contractors through their responsibilities working with NV Energy on the activation of solar systems or other energy-related projects? And then in your experience, are there common mistakes contractors are making that are causing public health concerns from NV Energy's perspective?
Sure. First of all, let me start with the application review for an interconnection. When we receive an application, we will check that the contractor's license is valid and in force, because that's the law. They must have an active contractor's license for us to move forward the application for interconnection. We ask that the contractors ensure that they're putting the correct license number in the application. Oftentimes we have the incorrect license number in there, and we have to do some digging and research or call the contractor to make sure we get that correct license number. So that's very important. And it's also important that they are working within their license monetary limit. If they have a contract with a customer for $50,000, for example, they have to make sure that their license covers that. So we are checking to make sure that their license will cover the monetary amount of the contract. We need the license to be active all the way through meter set. Of course, there's safety concerns as well that we want to make sure the customers are protected and the public. So when they are installing, there's NV Energy standards that are on our website that they can refer to. There's Rule 15 standards, and there's RE3 standards for the North and South. Those are all on our website at nvenergy.com. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. My cat had her locked in the other room, pardon me. Because, so yeah, from a safety perspective, if those safety standards aren't followed, for example, something could be wired incorrectly, and that would not enable the first responders or NV Energy personnel to go down and shut down that system if that was necessary in the case of an emergency. So we want to make absolutely certain that the safety standards are followed. The other thing is the wiring. For example, if they wire the meter incorrectly, that can cause the customer's bill to be inaccurate, and instead of giving them a credit for what they're exporting to the bill, could actually go the other way and cause an increase in their bill if things aren't wired correctly. So we look for that. And then another thing I wanted to touch on is access issues. So when we go to do a meter inspection for the interconnection, oftentimes we'll have an access issue with the perhaps a dog or a locked gate, excuse me, a dog, so we can't get in, or we need to get into the garage, perhaps if we're going to be inspecting an energy storage system. So we ask that the customer or the contractor be really transparent with us about that. We do have a dedicated clean energy programs line. They can call and let us know, you know, if there's any access issues that we need to be aware of, so that we can definitely prepare. So the safety standards, filling out the application correctly, making sure all of their license information is correct and valid is very important. As far as access issues, the garage, the dog, and the gate, those are the top 3 reasons in the South. 52% of inspections fail because of those three reasons. So you know, it's frustrating for the homeowner and for the contractor, of course, if that arises. So that's where the majority of those are. In the North, it's mostly installation issues. So incorrect installation, perhaps with the meter, or something that's not correct with the installation. That's most of the rejections in the North. Perhaps it's a line of sight issue, for example, that they don't meet the line of sight requirements or insufficient clearances. But one other thing that I wanted to touch on too is some advertising that we have seen out there. So oftentimes customers provided advertising that is, you know, inaccurate or misleading. And we do have a dedicated call center, and we'll hear from customers saying, the solar contractor told me or the salesman, whoever it was, that I would never have a bill again, an electric bill again. So we're concerned that there's transparency in the marketplace. You know, there's different levels of the solar salespeople out there, and we ask that they give customers honest and accurate information in regards to their to the solar system. I have some examples of that. I know what I wanted to touch on. So at nvenergy.com, clean energy, we do have a contractors corner. We just had a contractor update meeting at the end of July, and we do have the entire PowerPoint presentation and a recording of the presentation posted there. And we go into detail about a lot of the, you know, perhaps the rejection problems that we would find for the applications and such, if folks wanted to look at that in more detail. And yeah, please contact us at any time. Again, we have an email address, cleanenergy@nvenergy.com, as well as a dedicated phone line to assist the contractors through the application process if they have any questions.
Sounds great, Ms. Harman. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Circling back to the group as a whole, I know we've touched on some of these, so but I just wanted to see if there are any big compliance related issues noticed since the pandemic began, and what changes, if any, has your agency made to not only provide new resources but also meet the needs of contractors during this time?
Jennifer, the same overall, as far as, you know, the COVID situation has made life in the field very difficult. You know, with the inspectors, contractors, owners, builders, et cetera, all being out there trying to maintain safe distances, safe separations, hand sanitizers, et cetera. It's a challenge. One of the things we've done to help the situation and help everybody stay in compliance is we're offering remote video inspection services. I think just about every AHJ across the U.S. now has some form of remote video inspections available to the customers, and it's as simple as, you know, as a smartphone with, you know, Zoom or whatever may be on your phone, and our connections back in the office. But we will do simple inspections via the phone, via remote inspections, and keep everybody in compliance, keep everybody running. You know, the homeowner or the contractor, if it's a simple mechanical change out, they can run the camera up there. We can take a good look at it. We can direct them on what to take pictures of, et cetera. But it keeps everybody very safe, very distanced, and yet we can still get the job done. But I put the offer out there, remote video inspections, as much as a good program as it is, we're just not seeing a lot of use of it. So as contractors, use that to your best ability. You can almost get same-day inspections on remote video inspections from us. And it doesn't matter, up north, down south, remote video is across the board, and it's here to stay. Following back on Paul's comment, I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is actually a form board stake that went right through the middle of the pipe. Unbelievable. That's untouched. Our guys just cut it out after it was all repaired. And I said, no, I'll save that, because people say, no, we never nick or hit something. I mean, that was almost dead center on the center of the pipe. I mean, it's just unbelievable what happens out there. And also sewer lines. Sewer lines, yeah, it might take a little while before things start to back up or leak or whatever, but eventually it becomes a mess. But also out there, with COVID, all of the agencies, their main lobby areas have been shut down for a long time. We're now starting to reopen. Clark County, our lobby is now open to walk-ins, but we prefer appointments. But you can now, everything we're going is 100% electronic plan submittal. So you might as well get used to it. And that's across the US. And I just don't see that trend going backwards to the old paper plan submittals. Everybody's getting used to the 100% electronic submittals. Right now, we're working through the bugs, and some of them are large bugs, trying to get the submittals into the process. But once they're in the process, we can manipulate them a lot easier, pass them around each other, do the plan reviews, do the engineering, and then get ready for the permits. So electronic plan review, the submittal of it, the review of it, and the actual permit issuance of it, it's here to stay. And as contractors, on the Sella Citizen portal, every software has a different acronym for that, but the way you access in as a contractor to look at your permit and look what's going on, get very familiar with that, because that's where you're going to get the information. You can do it 24/7, and you don't have to wait till we're open to see what's going on. Here in the next few months, Clark County is actually going to start implementing ePermit Hub. That'll be our new software for all of our plan submittals. Hopefully that will speed up the situation and get things out the door a little bit easier, faster, and we can respond via email back and forth. So electronics is here to stay. A couple of other quick questions or items that we've seen: damage assessment reports. Structure has a fire, a flood, or whatever it may be. Contractors come in and call for a damage assessment report. They're a very easy tool to use. Our inspectors go out, we have a dedicated crew, they go out, they look at the structures, they literally do a damage assessment report, a DAR. That report, the contractor can take down to our front desk and submit. Rather than using detailed plans, they can use the damage assessment report, and we can issue a permit real fast to get the work back into progress. The key issue on damage assessment reports is only for simple projects. Like for like change outs of damage, wallboard insulation, very light damages, whatnot. If you get into the structural or electrical type major issues, whatnot, nope, please don't use the damage assessments. Those are going to require a full set of plans and submit those. But the DARs are a very simplistic way of getting the work done. Also, just as a quick comment to everybody, Clark County, a couple of weeks ago, we changed our office hours. We now only operate between Monday through Thursday from 7:30 to 5:30 p.m. Now, that said, those are the main hours across all the county for all departments. On the construction side, as far as for inspections, be that public works or the building department or not, we still will work Monday through Friday. But again, please remember, we'll only have half staff on Monday and half staff on Friday. But we will service the needs of the construction. So just be aware, Mondays and Fridays, we're going to be running very fast. And then we also just changed out our website. And this is, again, for Clark County as a whole. Brand new website. A lot of our links got busted, and now we're trying to reestablish the links to make sure you can get in there and find the information that you need. But looking at it, when it's fully operational, it's very friendly. But that website can give you a lot of information, in particular on the electronic plan submittals, the email addresses that you need to get those in. So those are some of the things that we've had to deal with, in particular electronic plan review with COVID. But we're trying our best to stay on top of everything and keep everybody running. But again, I can't overemphasize it. If you're having troubles or slowdowns or you're not hearing from us, please give me a call, 702-455-8885. 8032, and I'll make sure we get responses. And across the state of Nevada, all of the building departments, we've got phone numbers, contact information for all of them. And so you can stay in contact and try and keep your jobs running. So that's, in general terms, what we've seen in regards to our COVID situations.
Mr. Palmer, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. I know you also serve as president for the Nevada Organization of Building Officials. A lot of what you've shared today is specific to kind of Clark County and the Southern Nevada region. Are you seeing similar issues being reported from the building departments up north and across the state, or are they seeing different trends? I'm not sure if you can answer that, but just based off your knowledge.
Very similar trends. We stay in good contact. We try very hard to talk to each other on a very regular basis. In particular, be that technical issues or code issues or legal issues, whatnot. We try very hard to maintain a continuity between all the departments. It's critical. You know, what happens in one area, if it affects the other areas, we need to advise the other departments to say, hey, look out for this and change that or whatever it may be. So we try very hard to communicate well across the board. We meet quarterly and online. And in fact, Contractors Board, we've used y'all's video conferencing programs quite a bit. It's very helpful. We also have a group down south, the Southern Nevada Organization of Building Officials. It's a subset for Southern Nevada. And again, the whole purpose is to talk amongst the agencies to get that continuity or that camaraderie built up. Each building department or agency is its own legal entity. As such, we have our own laws, but we try very hard to keep those laws as very similar, if not the same, across the board. So one contractor, there's 5 different agencies down south. Theoretically, hopefully, you pull one permit, you should be able to do the similar work across the board. But that's the roles of both SNOBO and NOBO, is to try and get good communications and continuity across the boards, and we try very hard to do the same. The remote video inspections, across the board, all the agencies are doing that. I've talked to the guys up in Alaska. You know, the remote video is beautiful for them. They don't have to send a guy out 3-4 hours away just to do a water heater exchange. But they're all very similar concepts, and believe me, everybody's still fighting the COVID issues, you know, from their own internal agencies as well as out there on the job site.
All right, Jennifer, regarding the Contractors Board, as I stated, we had stopped our job site visits during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic. Once we reinstituted them, we just made sure we followed the guidelines of the CDC, make sure that not only the contractor, but the homeowner or the complainant understands that we're under very strict regulations as far as distance and everything, and wearing masks and what have you. So what we've also done, and we've been able to use this pandemic time in order to really emphasize the virtual board meetings, virtual recovery fund meetings, virtual disciplinary hearings. And actually they've worked, I think, in an outstanding manner. I think staff's done a great job in utilizing the technology. And actually for the recovery fund, we're getting more participants via Zoom than we were before, simply because instead of having to show up to either Reno or Henderson, you can now do it anywhere, as well as on the disciplinary hearing and the board meetings. The other thing is that we've also done interviews relative to if we've got claimants that are putting forth interviews or complaints. We can do an interview via Zoom as opposed to having them come into the office. It's safer for them. It's more, I think it's more convenient for all parties involved, and be able to do it that way. So the contractor may not have to come into the office. He can do it sitting in his truck on site and do the interview that way. And as long as we get the information, we're happy with that. So I think that's worked out well. As far as personnel is concerned, we had, we're actually a little less in personnel than we were prior to the pandemic. I think we're operating more efficiently than we were before, and making certain changes within the agency. I think it's made things better for for us and for the public.
Yeah, and this is Paul Mcguire from the PUCN. You know, I was kind of shocked at this, but actually excavation work is actually up through mid-year 2020. So you would have thought, well, the pandemic and the layoffs would have shut down. No, we're actually up 2.3% on the number of tickets that have been called in. So excavation work hasn't slowed. Excavation damages continue to trend down, but they're still occurring. And, you know, I just go back to, in this COVID crisis, the last thing you want to do is have the fire department have to evacuate somebody's home and have them come out and stand on the street or go and live with a relative because you dug into their stuff. And the last thing the fire department wants to do, or the gas company or the electric company want to do, is go into your house and have to relight stuff because a contractor dug into your line and you had to have service reestablished. And my wife's a second grade teacher. She cringes every day hoping the internet works and the Zoom loads up and the kids get on. The last thing we need is somebody digging into the fiber lines or the phone lines and the internet going down. So that's what I would say is the most important, especially with this crisis, is our infrastructure is even just more important, and upsets from day to day are even more disruptive.
And from our side, we've seen a pretty steady flow of applications continually for solar systems, even throughout the pandemic. We're about 15% less than last year, but again, a fairly steady stream. Some of the fallout we've seen is perhaps a contractor has lost their license through, because of the reasons of the pandemic. So we try and work closely with those customers to help them find another contractor, to provide resources that they can find another contractor that can go ahead and complete the job for them, so that they can have a licensed contractor take the project all the way through to the meter set and meter installation, and give them the permission to operate the system.
Great, thank you. We haven't received any other questions, so I guess I'll just take a quick moment to see if there are any questions from the audience. And if so, you're welcome to unmute your microphone and ask it of the panelists at this time. All right, well, seeing none, I do have one quick follow-up question. Although we're talking about regulatory and compliance issues for contractors, a lot of your agencies serve the needs of the public as well. So I know when we do our presentations, we often advise contractors to consider the information we're providing as not only a contractor, but in their role as a homeowner as well. Do you guys have any consumer related information that you think would be valuable to share with this group that either they can pass along to their consumers, or just kind of key messages that you share with the public about how they can protect themselves as they work with contractors or your agency in general?
Sure, well, I can chime in about that. I think, I'd like to pass on the NV Energy website. If they go to nvenergy.com/clean energy, it is full of resources meant to educate the public on, installing a solar system, what solar means, how a solar system actually works. Many people aren't familiar with the technical aspects of a solar system. We also have information about energy storage systems on there. So I really advise folks that, it's a great resource there, the NV Energy website, and they can direct customers to it, or, again, contractors go there for a resource as well, but it's very, very useful to find out information about renewable technologies. And I'd like to mention our phone number too. I saw you put our email address in the chat box. Thank you so much for that. We do have a dedicated phone line. If anyone has questions, it's 866-786-3823. So you can call in and talk to one of our specialists about, clean energy questions, or your particular. I know all the contractors are familiar with that phone number. They call and ask us questions about the status of their application and such, but just wanted to reiterate that for folks.
This is Paul Mcguire from the PUCN. Yeah, we rate regulate and safety regulate most of the utilities in this state. That'd be NV Energy, Southwest Gas, We don't do some of the county and municipal waters, but we do some private water companies, and we do some telecom. We have a customer complaint division. They're there to field calls. So if you think you have a billing problem or a shut-off problem or a service problem, you know, we have a staff of compliance investigators there to take your call and investigate your complaint, because as part of being a regulated monopoly, these utilities have obligations to serve customers because you don't have a choice, and there are requirements that they have to meet for service.
Jennifer, this same question or same comments as before. We also, on our website, there's tons of information on who do you need to contact, what do you need to do for permits, plans check, engineering, etc. So, I mean, it's a wealth of information to get down there. But one of the best thing that I advise all the contractors or the citizens calling in is whenever you talk to somebody in the agencies, I don't care if it's the county, north or south, make sure you understand who you're talking to and get their phone number and or email, because invariably they said, hey, I talked to somebody in the building department. Well, that's, you know, 250 people I gotta worry about and try and track down. Or at least if you can, give me a building permit number and or an address. At least I can start there and continue on. But you know, I answer the phone a lot every day just trying to resolve issues, but it helps when I have just the basic information to start with.
And Jennifer, yeah, for the board, we have a number of documents that are available for homeowners relative to solar poles, just general contracting. And that's on our website, nvcontractorsboard.com. And really encourage homeowners, if you have any questions or anything like that, if they're looking at it, potentially starting a project, to go on there and they can find some information. The other thing is, I would also emphasize to both the contractors and to the homeowners to make sure that the contract is detailed, that is signed by both parties. Any change orders are signed by both parties. Additionally, the contractor should make sure they've got, as Ms. Harman said, that they stay within the scope of their license and the monetary limit, as well as making sure that the residential recovery fund notice is given to residential homeowners, and ensure that the whenever they're doing work, if they're a contractor, if they're doing work that requires a permit, you know, for Sam, pull the permit, please, because you're going to save a lot of problems for yourself. Because not only if we found out you didn't pull one permit, we're probably going to find out you didn't pull a few permits on previous jobs. So please do that. You know. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, if there's no other questions, we'll turn it over to Ms. Green.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of the panelists today on this contractor complaint. And Ms. Harman, tell your cat thank you very much for trying to have her Zoom meeting. That was cool.
I apologize. I thought I had her locked up.
That was a lot of fun. Anyway, thank you again for excellent presentation and for helping us educate not only our viewers today or participants, but also all of us. So thank you very much.
Okay, as we did with the last panel, we're going to transition to our State of the Industry panel. We'll give about 10 minutes there, so take a brief intermission. If our current panelists can please go off of video, and the next set of panelists go on video in about 5 minutes, we'll give everybody a chance to get up and stretch their legs. Thank you. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Leave it to Nat to come up with some fancy background that we don't have.
If you want to turn on your camera, you can hit down here in the left-hand corner. It's going to be the exact background.
Was Nat's birthday yesterday?
Okay.
Yeah, I got a year older.
Happy birthday, Nat.
65?
Thank you. 36 years old there, Sean. I figured that background is better than my office. It looks kind of boring.
Well, clearly the home builders are still making money, so we could bring that up.
Well, that's a free app. The commercial guys have one built for them.
Start your video.
Bill's in California.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. I'm actually in Wendy's office, so my computer quit on me this morning. So I'm borrowing Wendy's computer. She has all this fancy stuff, or at least she understands how to make it work.
I'm just going to give Mr. Tatro, I believe, a couple more minutes, and then we'll see if he joins.
Was he on earlier, Jen?
I don't think I saw him, Ms. Green. I just sent him a note, though, so we'll see if he is checking that.
Okay.
Don just said he was joining. Oh, there he is. All right.
And it looks like we lost Mr. Stewart. Let's see if he comes back on.
I'm here. I was just hiding.
No worries. Okay, is everybody ready to get started?
Ah,
Rotated it.
Excellent. Well, this is our last panel presentation for the day. We're going to be discussing the state of the industry and giving a little bit of an overview about where we've been, where we're going, and what we see today. So to start, as we've done with the previous panels, if you could each just take a moment to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your association, we would appreciate that.
I vote Craig goes first.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Madola. I'm the CEO of the Nevada Chapter Associated General Contractors. We represent primarily the commercial and industrial section of the construction economy. Everything north of Tonopah is kind of our area there. The AGC was established here in Reno, Nevada in 1939, and we have been partnering, and we do represent our members in collective bargaining and in the legislature and local government issues. And we also try to represent them in regulatory and other environments throughout the state.
I'll go next. I'm Matt Hobson, the CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. We represent the residential contractors. That's builders and subcontractors alike, along with HOA companies, mortgage and title companies are our members. We handle the southern part of the state, and my partner in the northern, Mr. Tatro, handles the other half of the state. So there's two of us, and we've been around a long time, and we are the advocacy for residential home building.
I can jump in there. Sean Stewart with the Nevada Contractors Association here in Las Vegas, Southern Nevada. We represent about 500 general contractors, subcontractors, suppliers in Southern Nevada with much of the similar things that is done in the north of Craig Medol. So we're kind of partners in the state. He has the north, I have the south, and we usually work well together. So we'll see how it goes today.
Yes, I'll jump in. My name is Don Tatro, and I represent the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. Similar to what Nat said, we have a very similar makeup in our membership. And a lot of multifamily is growing here, and so we've seen an increase in that, as well as the residential single-family home builders and a wide variety of others interested in the residential industry. So, and similar to what Sean said, we usually get along with that. So.
I guess I'm last. So I'm Bill Stanley, and I represent the Southern Nevada Building Trades Unions, a conglomerate of 14 trade unions here in Southern Nevada. I have a counterpart in Northern Nevada, Rob Benner, who represents the Northern Nevada Building Trades. We represent craft unions who work primarily for contractors, both general and subcontractors throughout the state. We represent them not only in their terms and conditions of employment, but we also do the government affairs work that affects construction workers throughout the state.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to first start with Mr. Stewart and Mr. Medol. This time a year ago, commercial construction was thriving, obviously, with more work than the industry could keep up with, it seemed. How has commercial construction changed in the past year, and what impact will the pandemic and economic decline have on the future of this sector moving forward?
Yeah, and I can jump in there a little bit. I was just thinking about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, I was speaking to over at Southern Nevada Community College. We were talking to some of the construction management majors, and we were talking about all the work going on in the state, how busy we were. And at that time, I had some slides. We had over $15 billion with a B worth of work going on in Southern Nevada that was either started or was getting ready to start. And the message was, I don't know how we're ever going to get all this work done. And then 2020 happened, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So we all know 2020 has been quite a year, and it's had an impact on construction as well as all the other industries. But to kind of sum up where I think we are, a lot of our major projects have finished or are finishing. Some projects are getting ready to go. But I think there's an uneasiness, obviously. I think COVID has had a huge impact on the state. I think it's different than 2008 with the downturn in the economy, in that there's still a lot of optimism, but there's that uncertainty. And anytime there's uncertainty, it disrupts the chain of events that it takes to put a project on. And what I mean by that is you can't just decide you're going to build a project and go do it. There's permitting, there's financing, there's timetables that have to work together. And what we're seeing right now is there is disruption in that timetable. Projects that were started or finishing up, some were put on hold, like the Drew here in town. But for the most part, everything is finishing up. But we don't see a lot of new projects that are getting all of the pieces in place they need to be successful. So what I see in Southern Nevada is we are going to have some growing pains, probably the first quarter of 2021, if not longer. We're going to be figuring out how to fill those voids in time that were created when permits weren't pulled or architect plans weren't finished. So right now it's still robust. I think Bill would agree with me. We still have a lot of people working here in Southern Nevada, and I think we will through the end of the year as projects finish up. But then there's going to be a lull caused by the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I would echo what Sean said. I think we're a little more unique here in Northern Nevada, that we were able to continue working. The governor recognized construction as being an essential industry, so our members were able to work through the stay-at-home order. However, you know, a lot of our members did have a pretty significant backlog, so they were able to kind of get to their backlog a little sooner than they had anticipated, which is particularly in Northern Nevada for the winter. You know, we normally see the majority of projects shut down. So come the spring will really be the tell for Northern Nevada, is if how many of those projects continue to go and how much of that investment has continued to be made. We've seen a pretty significant pullback in public works construction projects, both from NDOT and the state. So we're really kind of anticipating seeing more of that impact in that market, you know, in the spring and into next summer.
So shifting over to more of the residential trends, Mr. Hodgson and Mr. Tatro, in what ways have residential trends changed over the past year? And what challenges have residential contractors had to overcome or may still be dealing with during the pandemic? Among those, are there different priorities or trends among the industries in North versus South?
We can't hear you, Nat.
That's usually the best way to hear my my intros anyway. Sorry about that. I'll start off, Don, if you don't mind. Well, we've seen a record number of cancellations right when the pandemic hit, which was very unfortunate. It was like just falling off a cliff. But then as quick as it fell off the cliff, which was really weird, within a 4-week period, we were starting to spike up pretty good. And about 2 weeks ago, last month, we hit a record high for new residential construction permits since 2009. So I think at first everybody just took a pause. Some people knew they couldn't go forward with the sale. And some people just said, hey, I can go forward, but I want to wait to see what's going to go on. And sort of what Craig was saying, you know, it's good right now. It's solid, but we all know that we're going to have a quiet time period. We didn't have land sales for 6 months, and we just started to have a couple, but there's still not a bunch. There used to be a land sale every week. So we know that the pig through the python is coming, you know, call it January next year or whatever. But obviously we're waiting to get our economy back on its feet to know that we can sustain these numbers. I think we're all in the same boat where we wake up every day and you don't know what to expect. This has been a very different time. There's absolutely nothing that's the same as the recession, except for that it sucks. But other than that, none of the metrics, none of the underlying factors are the same. So, you know, time frames are taking longer to process jobs. But at the same time I say that, I got to commend all the municipalities and agencies. We only had one that was online when this pandemic hit. And within a 2-week period, every single agency municipality had to go online. So although the processing times are still slow, they're happening. So hats off to them. I think it was a 3-year plan for some of them that was done in, you know, 2 weeks. So I commend them. So Don, I don't know if you're looking at the same stuff up north.
Yeah, pretty similar trends, I guess I would say. You know, here we're constricted by land and where we can grow. That's one of the biggest barriers. We're seeing significant demand from California, and that has brought our sales in the kind of the post-COVID time to where they were before or even higher now. So, but one of the biggest things that everyone's looking for, like you're saying, Nat, is, yeah, we went from to digital plan review. And I think at the beginning, Reno was at about 16% of their permits being reviewed digitally to now they're at almost 90% of their permits being reviewed digitally, which is huge. But the long time to get through the approval process for maps is a significant delay, and the pipeline's kind of drying up almost to where we were in 2015, I'd say. So you're going to see some lag there, but we're also seeing a very long or a longer build time due to the restrictions of only having one trade in the house or something like that because of the separation requirements and that really and then lumber going through the roof has also been a significant impediment to keeping the cost down. We're seeing material costs go through the roof, a little bit of a stabilization, I think, in the labor cost, but when trying to keep these homes at an affordable level or attainable level to the market, that's putting a lot of pressure on it. And I think the other thing is the sort of regulatory creep is what I would say. So whether it's building codes, whether it's a variety of different things, those all add to the cost in the long run. And really what our guys are craving is some sort of certainty. Just to be able to kind of continue with what we know and what we have, even seeing some outlets that are going to delay projects. The new requirements, you can't get them shipped here because of a variety of different factors. So you know, those are the things that are going to slow projects down, but the demand is significant. I think I covered all of your questions, kind of a few in there. So.
No problem. We can always come back. Mr. Stanley, in addition to just kind of some of these industry trends, can you share some of the impacts being felt specifically by Nevada's workforce? What are you seeing as workers' biggest concerns right now? Are they having to adapt to a changing work environment in light of the governor's emergency declaration, and how is that going? And are there other opportunities for the industry to do more to protect and serve the needs of its workforce?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the obvious answer is COVID-19. You know, that is the biggest concern of the workforce. I can tell you that the industry come together like, I don't know that I've seen it in my career, where we sat down with a group of folks from the industry, both folks representing contractors and representing labor union, and sat down in a room and really developed best practices, I'll call it, for dealing with COVID-19. And, you know, both Mr. Stewart, Sean, and Craig Medole are part of that conversation as a whole. And I think the value that was driven out of that room on how we deal with things, how we interface with other government agencies that were involved here, obviously OSHA and health districts and everything that was in the beginning of this pandemic, and how we were going to keep construction sites both accessible and safe was a hard question. And where most industries were shut down, we were appreciative that we were declared essential by the governor's office, and that we were able to work through the issue within the industry to come up with those best practices, so that we weren't, to the best of our ability, not exposing people to this virus. That, I think, spoke well to our industry. But that's still the number one issue that we face. We have an aging workforce. It's not a surprise to folks on this call. We have an aging workforce. You know, they're folks that look like me, and they're concerned about this virus and how it may affect them moving forward. So we continue to deal with that issue pretty much on a daily basis. The other issue, and it's been touched on a little bit here by others, is that, you know, there's still a fear, because there is a memory of 2008. This in Southern Nevada, I won't speak to Northern Nevada, but in Southern Nevada, the day Fountain Blue, which is now the Drew, shut down, Southern Nevada construction didn't go into a recession. It went into a depression, and it took several years. It was 2010, 11, 12, into 13, 14 before we even saw a workforce that was that even rivaled the numbers that were post 2003 working in Southern Nevada. And so, you know, when you see what's going on, and I think both Craig and Sean alluded to it from the contractor's perspective, when you see $15, $20 billion worth of work, you first scratch your head, and I answered the question to many contractors, like, how are you going to man the work? I don't think that any of us are asking or answering that question today. We're trying to figure out where the work's going to come from. And I am optimistic that there's three huge projects here in Southern Nevada, the Drew, the MSG, and these will be the third phase of the convention center. If those three projects, you know, they're put on hold now, but if those three projects go the first quarter of next year, we're going to be okay for a while. But that's a big if. You know, and I would sum it up and say this: the difference here than what I saw in 2008 is capital is still engaged in Southern Nevada. The problem we had after Fountain Blue stopped is capital receded from Southern Nevada. We couldn't get a project funded. You know, I was running around this country trying to get projects funded, from New York City to Chicago, to trying to get anybody to fund a project, even from our own pension fund. No one would touch Southern Nevada. I think the housing market collapse in Southern Nevada had repercussions that really scared capital away from here for a while. You know, the stadium, and I know many on this helped, and we were in the legislature, you know, really lobbying hard for that stadium because it was really the first infusion of capital, and we've seen what happened since then. After that capital was infused into Southern Nevada, we really had an explosion of construction. I think many of us in the construction industry predicted that. And so I hope capital stays here. You know, I hope we can continue to be a secondary market for those types of lending institutions to continue to invest here. And if that happens, we'll be okay.
And just to kind of add a follow-up question to that, you had mentioned that right now the focus is a little bit more, it shifted rather to the projects, right? Trying to find the projects and waiting for the work to come back to the industry. As we look at that from a workforce development perspective, are we still, through construction being deemed an essential industry, have we noticed an impact like the state has felt with unemployment in construction? Have we seemed to retain many of our workers across the industries, or the trades, I should say? What impacts are you seeing on workforce development moving forward, even though that might not be the priority focus right now in many of the trades? Have we seen an impact in that based on the pandemic results?
Thank you, Jennifer. In the trades, we have full employment at the moment. For all intents and purposes, we have full employment. If you want to go to work here, you can go to work. There are some individuals who have chosen there are some individuals who have chosen to withdraw from the workforce. And I think that's expected, whether they have an underlying condition themselves or they have someone in their family, maybe that is in their home, and they've chosen to withdraw themselves for the time period from the workforce. But for most intents and purposes, we have full employment throughout the trades. On the workforce development side of things, we still have record high employment of apprentices. Apprentices are being employed throughout the industry. I can tell you that at the stadium, at the Raider Stadium and at the Las Vegas Convention Center, you know, we had project labor agreements in place there to construct those projects, and we had minimum apprenticeship requirements built into those project labor agreements. We had a 15% apprenticeship requirement at the stadium and a 15% apprenticeship requirement at the Las Vegas Convention Center, with 5% of that 15% being required to be first-year apprentices, individuals brand new to the construction industry. We have met and exceeded those benchmarks. It has been good for our industry. We have about 10 years, as I said before, from 2008 to maybe 2014, we didn't have a lot of apprentices. So we have a gap in our workforce where we're desperately needing to fill that moving forward. And I think this last building boom, or the building boom we're in now, has helped us fill some of that void that we missed. And we need more. I mean, we're not there yet. We still going to have issues and demographic issues moving forward in the building trade if this recovery is not sustained.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
You know, Jennifer, if I could just take this time, because Bill said it. I want to take the opportunity to thank Sean, don't fall out of your chair, but Sean and especially Craig Madole in his office. When this whole thing hit, they did reach out to us residential guys. And I tell you, it was actually the model for the nation, because the big safety stand down that happened because of these two gentlemen getting us together, NHB took nationwide, and they were about three and a half weeks behind what the state of Nevada did. So that just shows how the construction industry, commercial and residential in the state of Nevada, just miles ahead of the other states. And, you know, it's good working with this team. So Sean, that's a compliment. I want you to put that in the books. I might need to use that favor later. But Craig and Sean, thanks a lot for including us.
This is Don, and I just echo the same thing. I thought that was, it was a lot of fun actually to all kind of be on the same side during that time and talking to each other in a very friendly manner. One other thing that just kind of came to mind was when we're looking at these trends and how things are changing, I think we've seen a lot of changing in what the demand is for new homes. So you'll see a shift in home offices. You're going to see a shift in people wanting bedrooms. And I think that's a lot of what people are doing now is they found what they didn't like and liked, but as long as people are working from home and they're continuing on that trend, I think we'll see a significant shift and demand in, at least in Northern Nevada, from people saying they don't want to pay Bay Area prices and coming over here. So I think that's going to be a long-term transition that we'll see in a variety of different ways through everything being constructed.
Jennifer, if I can jump in really quick, I think something that's a little off subject but needs to be brought up is the positives of this pandemic, which there are very few. But one of the positives is our construction industry has changed forever, and it's changed in good ways. Some of the changes that coronavirus has brought on our job sites has required us to deal with and adapt to. They're great changes, both in safety and how we approach issues on the project. I think it was long overdue, and I didn't want to do it all at the first part of 2020, but as the other gentlemen have said, we adapted as an industry and took these on ourselves and made some great changes. But also in the way that we build these projects, Nat talked a little bit about how every entity we deal with is now digital. We've made some great advancements in how we permit, how we get these projects ready to go that were by necessity. I think that speaks to the character of Nevada as a whole, that we're very creative and willing to adapt to the situation and done some great things in a really tough time.
And if I may, just to build on something that Bill Stanley had said, is I think that one of the things too that's helping us attract the next generation of construction employees is the fact that we have seen several sustainable years of job growth, good wages, but you know, hey, during the pandemic, I think a lot of people saw those construction jobs continuing to work. The projects were constructed safely. We worked well with our labor partners. And I think that continues to attract the next generation that we need to replace those skilled craftsmen, but also the engineers, the architects, and the construction management professionals are getting a little long in the tooth too. And we need to make sure that we're replacing them at the same rate we're replacing those skilled craftsmen.
Thank you. And it does sound like individuals that are attending today are reflecting similar trends in the industry, noting that their jobs aren't necessarily going away. They've had a couple deferrals, but they're just seeing not as large value of projects. So it sounds like the size of the project might be smaller, but work is still available, which is a good sign for Nevada. So it's already been touched on, and I do think it's important that—
Jennifer, so before we move off this subject,
Yes, sir.
I think it's important, and I should have covered it. I think it's important to give credit where credit's due. You know, this state has been in a financial crisis. It is in a financial crisis. And during the last session, special session, I'm sorry, not the last one, the first special session, you know, this governor and the legislature working collectively, it passed bipartisan, and I think that's rare in our politics. But you know, this state found a way to fund its public works projects, and we moved many of them from the general fund to a bonding into bond. But we were able to walk away from that special session with most of our public works projects intact. We lost a big one in Southern Nevada in that we lost the engineering building at UNLV. But for the most part, when you looked at how the rest of the state was dealt with in budget-wise, construction walked out of there intact. And we saw, you know, I think there's 6 projects total. I may be off a little bit. I think, again, probably Craig or Sean can jump in. I think we lost 6 total projects out of the whole CIP budget, which I give credit to both the legislature and the governor's office for finding a way to keep those projects funded, because that moving forward is going to be vitally important to the recovery of the state. Thank you. I'm sorry for jumping back in.
Not a problem. Thank you for doing so. But as was mentioned earlier, you know, in light of all of the challenges that the state has been facing, I do think it's very important that we acknowledge the efforts the industry has made to not only respond to the needs of the industry and coming together, as you've talked about, in a collaborative way, but really addressing the needs of the community. I mean, there were so many stories and so many instances where contractors and association members and everybody went above and beyond to go out of their way and to donate their time and resources. So I just wanted to give a moment to see if you guys can share some of the examples that you came across during these tough times, just to reflect that, you know, it reinforces the fact that we are a community and that construction really is just more than building, you know, the infrastructure in cities and homes that we live in. It's really about establishing that community and being there for one another. And I just wanted to give you all a chance to highlight some of those things that you've seen during these times.
You know, I'll kick it off here. My group down here in Southern Nevada, I mean, just days after the pandemic, through the subcontractors called for a bunch of PPE collections, which we did, and we gave it to the state. Obviously not knowing in a few weeks after that, we would be needing that same PPE, but it was donated for the medical industry and good causes. And for the COVID task force, you know, we raised $460-some thousand to give back to the community. This is while the builders were laying off about 25 to 30%, unfortunately, of their actual own employees. So that just showed that they were looking at the big picture. And I know the whole state and every association, every agency did the same thing. But once again, I think it just speaks volume of our industries and our associations for the state of Nevada. So that made me pretty proud.
Just last week when school was starting, our members came together. Lemelson STEM Academy here in Reno, Nevada is a Title I school, 100% participation in free meals programs for all students. And their principal had reached out through us and said, hey, they don't have the resources to make sure these kids have the things they need. So our members came together. We bought 225 backpacks for every student in the school. We put every piece of school supply that every child would need in the backpack, so they don't have to share anything. And then the operating engineers here locally and some other folks came together, and we bought several $1,000s worth of plastic dividers to use on tables so the kids can work in their own little space without potentially spreading any virus. And you know, this industry is great for communities. You always see at every Little League field, you see every contractor in town's name on those, and it's just great to be a part of that and to see what, you know, people do give back to the community.
And another thing that was so quick, I echo Craig and Nat on that, but was when they had to put the extra in the parking garage, they put a space for Renown, and everyone jumped on board to help where they could with that, with donating supplies and that kind of thing. Our charity jumped to try and get supplies to those people who were in trouble or we thought were at risk in a variety of different populations. And another area where I saw a significant amount of people come together were our landlords in the multifamily, working with their tenants, with folks who were unemployed or trying to immediately reach out and come up with a way to keep everyone housed and keep things moving and keep life as normal as possible for folks who were in a kind of in a situation of extreme turmoil and in the unknown. So I was very proud of the associations here and also our members who just really jumped at any opportunity to help.
Unfortunately, the COVID crisis has shown us it's a real thing, and we unfortunately have lost quite a few. I shouldn't say quite a few. We've lost several of our employees to COVID. Employees in the construction industry in general. One thing that the contractors here in Southern Nevada have done that I've found really neat is donated money to a general fund, and then we identify those families who've lost a family member to COVID and then take them a check to help with rent or help with whatever they need. And that's been a really rewarding experience for my staff to get to go out into the community, meet these families, give them a virtual hug. We'd like to give real hugs, but we're still at virtual hug days, and give those families some money to help with their bills and their expenses. That's been neat. We've worked with labor to identify some of the labor that's been lost, and we appreciate those efforts. So for me, the community effort has shown me, no matter what happens in Nevada, we stick together as Nevadans. It's always a great thing to see.
Jennifer, if I may, I can tell you that, from the commercial side of things, I can tell you that it's good to the heart to watch folks react to really bad situations. And I can tell you that our contractor partners here in Southern Nevada has stepped up to the plate. There is no doubt in my mind that there are individuals working today who would not have been working. They have kept people around because no one wants to see another person on the unemployment rolls. And we understand that. And hopefully one day we'll put all this behind us and quickly, because one more day is one too many. But watching this industry come together, whether it be permitting to getting jobs off the ground and figuring out how the workforce is going to interact and what are best practices and what does the next job look like and who we're going to move there and how we're going to move them there and what that looks like. This industry has come together, in my 40 years that I've never seen before, and it's good. And I hope that we can take some of this away and move the whole construction industry in a direction that benefits everybody.
Thank you. That's all great information. I like to see that it really does transcend across all areas of our community, from education and so forth, our healthcare industry. And we talked about the workforce development, and I know we kind of touched on that it may not be as large of an issue as maybe it once was a year ago. But for those contractors that are struggling to maintain their workforce or have projects where they don't have those resources available, how can you guide them, or where should they go? I know we've talked about apprenticeship programs. What advice would you give them and the resources that they could utilize to still continue bolstering or training their own teams to be effective in the field?
Well, our apprenticeship programs are full. I'm not saying they're at capacity, but they're full. We are meeting our hiring demands, and we have met them throughout this expansion. We did not have, I never had a fear of meeting those expectations. We dealt with one of the largest construction expansions of all time when we built City Center, and we were capable of manning that. And I reminded developers who would come to my office and we would talk about what that looked like from time to time, that we weren't even approaching the numbers that we had in 2008, 2009, and actually 7, 8, 9 with City Center. We never approached those numbers again, nor do I hope we never do approach those numbers again. But having said that, we've met that demand. We have never had a call that I'm aware of that has not been filled, and we're still meeting that demand. So for the contractors and that I deal with in this office, we've been able to keep workforce in place. We continue to have some struggles with demographics looking forward. We have a large percentage of the construction workforce that is going to retire in the next 10 years. And we have to fill that void. And that's going to require some expansion of apprenticeship programs, which was the reason, and I heard the Labor Commissioner speaking to it earlier, and the Apprenticeship Director, Richard Williams, talking about it, is the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. We believe that it's going to require government to actually hire and employ apprentices on public works projects. That, our studies and our information showed that one of the places we were not adept at hiring apprentices was on our own public works project, where the taxpayer was spending money to build something. We weren't employing apprentices. I hope that's changing. I hope the data drives that, and hope it's changing, because in the private sector, hiring an apprentice lowers your labor burden. Hiring an apprentice lowers your costs, and it makes some sense. And so we hope that continues, and we hope to expand that. We hope to expand the use of apprentices on construction projects because our community is going to depend on it. We have to import the labor to do the hotel turnarounds and the remodels and the stuff that goes on continually in this valley. Well, actually, both Washoe and Clark. If we have to import that labor, those costs are going to go through the ceiling. As long as we develop that labor force here in Nevada, and those folks stay here, which they tend to do, we're going to be okay. But we need to continue this expansion. This construction expansion needs to continue. Hopefully, through this pandemic, as we showed, we know how to engineer our way around this virus, and we have done a pretty successful job of engineering our way around this to make sure that people can remain safe. And as long as we continue to work together, we'll get to the other side. And there's still an abundance of projects that are still funded, which I think that's the most important part. They're not projects that are looking for funding. We still have funded projects. And so we just need to move them forward. And I know people are cautious because with capital, there's always an issue of money on hand. And do I have enough to get through this? And how long is that going to last? And there's always people trying to predict that. If long as these funded projects feel comfortable to move forward, we're going to be okay. And I'm fairly confident of that, and I'm optimistic as we move that way. And if that happens, we're going to have plenty of training opportunities for folks to enter the construction industry, and I look forward to that.
Jennifer, if I can add to workforce development, unfortunately, we went through this back in 08 and 09, and the first thing that usually goes is any kind of workforce development, thoughts or classes you have. And I'm hoping we all don't ditch those ideas this time. Our nonprofit Homemade Southern Nevada is continuing the Homemade Works, and we're going to expand that with hopefully Clark County School District here very shortly. But it's fundamentals in construction. We need to get our next generations, because I think we all agree we're missing probably 2, some might even say 3 generations of actual physical construction workers. So we desperately need that. It's the last man-made production that we have here in America of this kind of magnitude, the American dream. Our biggest thing is being different than commercial and capital projects. What Don and I have to deal with this. We need the whole economy to come back, because our funding comes from Mr. and Mrs. Smith out there that if they don't have a job, there's no funding for homes. So we are pulling for every sector in our state and our nation to get back healthy. A lot of this transition has gone online, and I failed to mention one of my local builder president's famous line that kind of resonates well. Hopefully it'll go over well with this group. But for years people have been able to pick their spouse online. Well, they're buying their house online. So, I figure that's a quote worth stating here. But I hope we all stay focused on workforce. Again, we're doing our part in teaching fundamentals, because, it's the basic skills which stands up the walls of a house. So we will continue to focus that, and hopefully get some newer generations enthused about the industry.
I think to piggyback on what's been said on workforce development, one of the things that I'm most proud of being involved in is the ACE Charter High School up here up north. And I know Craig's very involved in it, and just about everyone in the industry in Northern Nevada. And it's a trade school. This year we've had a record number of freshmen enter into that school. And they come out with degrees in diesel mechanics, architecture, you name it, any part of the industry, and they're learning about it. They actually build a house every 2 years, and that helps fund the school. They sell it at market rate. It has been a phenomenal workforce development tool, and it's also great to see these kids and what how they're going through high school, what they're learning, and that they go out with jobs. We don't do a career fair, we do a job signing for seniors, and it's just a really phenomenal program. If anyone on this call wants to tour it or anything, I'd be more than happy to set it up. But it is a great school, and I'm very proud to support it, and I know others on this call support it as well.
And if I could just add what Don, that ACE program is phenomenal. We just started the communications here to bring the ACE program down here to South, but what they have there, Don, I think it's what, 10 years plus old, and it's just phenomenal. But and it'll be a 2-year plus project to get off the ground. But we have actually started the wheels in motion to duplicate what Don and Craig and her team up north has done. Best practices.
Jennifer, I think one of the other things that we're all aware of that I know we're committed to trying to improve is, women make up 52% of the world's population, but less than 10% of the construction workforce. And I know that we've started a women in construction group up here in Northern Nevada. I know Sean has it's got a different name, but something similar in Southern Nevada, that we really need to get women more interested and more involved in this industry. That's how we're going to be able to get that next generation of workforce. It largely, we need to expand our horizons and our past practices.
So with that, what message would you have if you guys had the ability to direct or motivate contractors? What do you hope that contractors, everyday contractors in the industry, would do to contribute to these overall efforts, whether it's workforce or industry, initiatives in general? How can they become engaged? What opportunities are available? What would you like to see in the workforce to step up to the plate?
I'll jump in there. I think each contractor needs to get engaged and get engaged at a fairly young age with the students. We have contractors who are adopting high schools here in the Valley, giving their resources, speaking if they're needed, providing job tours. But we found that maybe high school is not even soon enough. Junior high is a great time to expose the youth to construction and give them the opportunity to look at what we have to offer. And if there's an interest, make sure that they have a path to develop that interest. So I'd encourage them to get with the associations or on their own, reach out to the schools and show an interest in the student's career and be willing to contribute towards education for construction industry.
All right, anybody else want to add to that?
So Jennifer, so we have here in Southern Nevada, and they have a similar organization in Northern Nevada, which is made up of our apprenticeship coordinators. In Southern Nevada, it's the Southern Nevada Apprenticeship Program. Those coordinators in those programs, in those joint apprenticeship training committees, regularly. Now, obviously, we've had some issues since COVID-19, but up until COVID-19, these apprenticeship coordinators are regularly in the schools on a daily basis in the high school level. But I would agree with Sean. We need to get to folks way earlier than high school and start to change this paradigm. And I hate that word, and I just used it. But for too long, you were not considered successful unless you went to college. And that was really a societal, society promoted that. And we know now that there are great pathways to sustainable careers that go through construction. All of our apprentices in the state of Nevada that are engaged in these joint apprenticeship training committees have the opportunity to leave their JATC with an associate's degree, either issued from Truckee Meadow Community College in the north or the College of Southern Nevada in Southern Nevada. We partner with CSN, and they partner in the north with Truckee Meadows, and apprentices, apprenticeship is college level study. And these individuals leave these programs with associate's degree. They are, the true next generation of the construction industry workforce. They will be the superintendents. They will be the project managers. They will be the individuals that are actually making decisions about construction sites in the future. And we owe it as an industry to give them the best education and support of that education that we can.
Thank you. All right, so just to close our discussion here, can you share your thoughts, and we've touched on it a little bit, of how the state of the industry today compares to that of 2008? What's different? What should contractors feel more confident about this time around? And just kind of another question is, where do you see us a year or two from now?
hopefully we're past COVID. Frankly, I think that one of the reasons, and Bill alluded to this earlier, is people are a lot more confident this is going to be more similar to a 2000 or a 2001 September 11th event than the 2008 economic meltdown, because there is still a lot of private money available and continuing to be invested in construction. You know, in 2008, we saw private money completely dry up, and then everybody was competing for any public dollar available. I think we're seeing the inverse this time. There's more private money here in Northern Nevada. We have these industrial centers. We have a lot of private development happening, and we, you know, luckily we passed WC1, which provides $1 billion of new school construction for Washoe County. So I think that there's a lot of things in place now that just frankly didn't exist in 2008 to help carry our economy forward, the construction economy. I feel pretty confident that in 2 years, we'll see the majority of the workforce and the projects return to their pre-COVID environment.
And Jennifer, for residential, I think I alluded to it earlier, the biggest thing we didn't talk about, the biggest difference between now and the great year of 2008 and 9 is, you know, people's single largest investment is their house. Well, lending practices has been different for over 10 years now. People are not underwater. Today, the houses are selling because of the costs that are involved with land, material, Don alluded to earlier, labor. So there's nothing to scale back. I remember when this first started, I was hearing through the community out there, oh, we're gonna wait to see the prices drop. Well, and I quickly told reporters what have you, well, unlike 09, they're not gonna drop. If they do, that person's probably going out of business because you can't, there's nothing to drop back to. Today, the house pricing you see, and actually Don actually has a higher average sales price up north. It's what we're paying for the land, and God has personally told me at night that he's not making any more, so that's gonna continue to go up. And you know, it's artificially, unfortunately, we have the same barriers. Hopefully this federal lands bill grows some legs and goes, but it's gonna continue to be supply and demand. So pricing's gonna continue to go up, unlike it did in 09. So I gotta keep echoing that because it's called a fact. We see the numbers, and Don just briefly said the word lumber, but I don't know if everybody understands, just since April, it's April of this year, lumber's gone up 110%. That's anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a house that you get the same thing your neighbor got. So that's just one tidbit of what we're facing today. So you know, you value your house. Good news is it's about as secure as it can get.
I think I'd echo everything Nat said, and then you know, one of the biggest things here that we're hoping to see is continued demand with, and you're not seeing the huge spec building. You're not seeing people extremely leveraged out there with a ton of homes on the ground. The homes that you're seeing constructed are already purchased or will be purchased soon. So we're not seeing people leveraged way out there. You're also seeing, especially during COVID now, lenders are calling and verifying employment multiple times, whereas before they weren't verifying employment at all. So I think those are the differences, is you're not seeing as much investor activity as you are seeing people who are individually moving into the houses. So I think that will keep the housing market strong. And as Nat said, I mean, the prices are going up because the prices are going up. It's not an inflated amount there. But I hope to see, if you're asking a year from now, I would hope to just see a stable increase. If we could just see 3, 4, 5%, which we historically saw, you know, in the 90s or the 80s, I think everyone would be really happy with that, to see continued demand and just a little bit of an increase rather than these big ups and downs. I think stability is what the entire industry is craving.
All right, if there's nothing else to add, I'll just take a brief moment to open it up to any questions that we may have received from the audience. At this time, you're welcome to unmute your microphone and ask any questions of our panelists.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hi, my name is Evelyn Pacheco. I am the founder and the owner of Nevada Women in Trades. This question is to Bill Stanley for the building trades. And I want to ask you, Nevada Women in Trades is offering our service to you, the building trades. We would like to work with you to meet both our objectives to get minority women in the trades.
So, Jennifer, through you to Evelyn. Evelyn, you can reach out to this office. You know the number, and we continue to work and to make sure that we doing everything we can to be inclusive to both in all underserved communities, whether they be women, minorities, and we've got a pretty good success rate, and we continue to do that. We continue to work with women in the trades. We have many of our local unions all have women in the trades. I think most recently, the Nevada State Contractors Board had a forum on women in the trades, and we had a couple of women that participated in that, and they're just rock stars, okay? And we need to make sure that we get those women out in front of other women to show that there is a pathway in construction. I think, you know, I can go to a school, and I do, and I regularly go to school and talk to young folks about the construction industry. I have one message. You know, I take a group of folks with me when I go to the schools, and they don't look like, they're not old like me, okay? They're young and they're energetic, and I take women talking to women about pathways in construction and really talking to them about you can be successful is a lot different than me telling it. You know, it is important who is communicating the message. And so I think that we need to do that, and I commend the Nevada State Contractors Board for doing what you did in your panel discussion with women. I think that's important, and we continue to do, and we'll continue to work in that direction. We have to be more inclusive of women and underserved communities, because that's where the construction workforce is going to come from. Thank you.
Okay, can I rebut with that? What I'm asking you, Mr. Stanley, is building trades willing to work with Nevada Women in Trades? And can we get your contact information to do a follow-up on you wanting to work and wanting to make sure we both meet our objectives of getting minority women in trades? That's what I'm asking you.
Evelyn, we'll have our information sent to you so that we can follow up with you on this discussion.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the audience? All right, at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Green.
Well, thank you. I would like to thank our industry panelists. This was great. I really appreciated you guys taking your time today to help educate and inform us of what's going on in your industries. I know I work closely with all of you, and you're always here for supporting the board and supporting the good of the industry and the consumers that we all serve. So I appreciate that. And to the audience, I would like to also thank you for participating today in our event. This is our 7th event, and I think this was our best one, even though it was Zoom and it's a little bit awkward. I think we reached a lot more people today, and everyone seemed to be much more engaged. So again, thank you. And if any of you have in the audience or our panelists would like to see other training sessions, and we don't have to wait until next year because we can put these together rather quickly. And I know we had a lot of interest from other associations who wanted to be on the panel. We just didn't have enough slots for everybody. So we could set another training event. Send me your ideas on what you think are important topics to consider, and we'd love to do this again. So again, thank you all. Jennifer's contact information, I'm sure, is on the page if you have any comments. There's something, again, that you'd like to see in future training sessions. And as Evelyn mentioned, we are reaching out to women in construction. That's kind of a new plan for this year, and it's been really satisfying to talk to women's groups and getting them involved in the trades. So again, thank you all, and go Knights go.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.